Hello and welcome to Geekverse Sidequest, your weekly stop for video game news, reviews, and more here on the Geekverse Podcast Network. I'm your host, Dylan Muss, and today I'm very happy to have two special guests, both from the Nintendo Cartridge Society podcast, Mark Mitchell, Patrick Ellers. Welcome to the podcast. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having us, Dylan.
Yeah, very excited to be here.
Yeah, you guys are Nintendo experts, as your podcast title would hint at. And I was surprised to learn that you guys have been in the game since 2016. Geekverse is 2015, so we're similar there in terms of when we've been doing this podcast thing. But I'm very excited to have you guys here to talk about the new Mario Kart 8 Deluxe DLC courses. The second wave is out, and then to review Live Alive, which we have both, or all three of us have been playing kind of frantically, I guess, for the last 2 or 3 weeks here. So that's very exciting as well. To get a couple shout outs out of the way, make sure to join the Patreon to get episodes early and ad free. Follow the Facebook, Twitters, Instagrams, all that good stuff, Geekverse.ca. Make sure to leave a review. That really helps. It goes a long way. As you guys know as well, you guys are always asking for those reviews on your podcast as well. It really does make a difference, right? And then
we think it does. We think it does.
Yeah. That's what the rumors are. Thank you for Taylor doing the thumbnails for this episode and Amanda who does the music. And next week's episode is going to be a review of Cult of the Lamb. Have you guys seen that one? Interested in that? I don't know if it's a Switch title. It might be just a Steam one, but another Devolver Digital sort of joint.
It is coming out on Switch. I don't know if it's staying in date with the PC, but Nintendo's YouTube channel has been releasing a lot of trailers for it, so maybe it is coming out at the same time.
Nice.
It was also part of a Indie World Showcase.
That makes sense.
The most recent one.
Yeah, and I feel like the Devolver Digital, like that, just publisher in general, seems like to have pretty great support for the Switch. Like most of their games are lo-fi enough that they can get them on there, and it seems like they are interested in doing so. So that's a good bet as well.
Yeah, well, and it's just such a good ecosystem for indie games. You know that like you could play this on your big TV, or you could play it on the Switch in your hand. So
yeah. Definitely. So let's get into it. I want to first talk about your guys' podcast. So Nintendo Cartridge Society. I think one thing I really love about it is that you guys kind of match the energy of Nintendo in a way, in that I feel like it's a very lighthearted and fun show, but also very silly at times. Like some of the rankings you guys do is just like so bizarre, but it's so enjoyable at the same time. And it seems like you guys kind of do 2 episodes a week, usually like a newsy sort of episode, and then like a ranking or a list, or I don't know, some other like the ABCs of Nintendo GameCube, fun stuff like that. I don't. Is there something like in your guys' contract that you have to mention Star Tropics every episode? Because I feel like that's a running joke.
By me.
That, like,
all
I missed
driven
the
by
start
me.
of or something.
No, it's Mark and I we identified a couple little like pet issues in Nintendo that we have that we keep driving back to. And Star Tropics is definitely one of them. Wart from Super Mario Brothers 2 is another that we will always find a way to bring up Wart. Mark, what are some of our other like pet issues?
Pet projects. LaCroix, the bubbly tonic water that you can buy at grocery stores.
Wait, how is that related to Nintendo?
It's not.
It's not. It's just something we tend to dwell on a lot. But no, I mean, I feel like the genesis of our show was basically Patrick and I having an opportunity to hang out together a couple of times a week. And so it is really important. Like we do it because we think it's fun, and we're kind of, like making the show for ourselves, and have just been lucky that other people find the same ridiculous things we do entertaining.
Yeah. One of the like early on things that we identified was like, there are so many video game podcasts and so many Nintendo podcasts specifically. And we're like, okay, what do we got that no one else has got? And it's like, the answer is just Mark and Patrick. Like that's it. Right. So we got to keep bringing as much of ourselves to the show as we can, which means, if we're going to cast Broadway musicals with Animal Crossing characters, we're going to do it, So yeah, it is truly, like Mark said, we're just trying to entertain each other. And then luckily that entertains someone else too.
I gotta ask, so you've been doing it since 2016. I don't know if you've been doing these rankings and lists and things the whole time, but also recently I listened to the you ranked all of the Kirby copy abilities, which is, of course, there's like, whatever it is, 90 of them now, so it's like a lot to go through. But like, how do you guys come up with this many ideas for these rankings and lists? And like, how many do you have in the canon, like ready to go? Because like, I don't know how you've been doing that for years to come up with all of this stuff that you like somehow keep it going on a weekly basis. It's insane and very commendable as well, as someone who's always trying to think of like a fun topic or a fun ranking to do. You guys like just are so creative with it. So I love that about it.
Thank you for saying so. It's panic and flop sweat mostly.
Yeah, 100%.
That we as soon as we finish recording, the topic episode on Wednesday night to go out the next day, we kind of like stare at each other dead in the eyes and they're just like, what do you want to talk about next week?
Is it really that you don't have like just a backlog of things ready to go?
We don't. We have, and we've talked about doing it that way, but every week being an act of desperation has worked out for us so far. So we're just we're keeping it going.
Well, and we discovered and really just talked about it a couple weeks ago that we have a couple different like themes or like a couple different kinds of episodes, right? That we have like rankings. We've got, like you said, ABCs of. We've got like super goofy ones where we're just talking about like the character of Nintendo characters, right? And that's usually when we're like casting them in something, or we're
trying to get Wario a job as like the roadie for Metallica, or what was it?
Yeah, that's right.
Some band like that. Yeah.
So we just kind of go back to the well of like, okay, well, which one of these haven't we done in a little while? And then find a new spin on it. We'll run out at some point, but
100%.
There was a time
I really just.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no! I was just gonna say, like, really, it just, I don't know. It just kind of comes back to like, when we're pitching topic ideas, like I'm trying to make Patrick laugh, like, right? Like I'm trying to find a topic episode that is going to be like kind of crazy for us to do, and a little bit of like, well, I don't really know how we're going to do that, but we'll figure it out. Like the when we ranked the all the Kirby copy abilities in Super Smash Brothers Ultimate, and we ranked a while back like all the costumes from Super Mario Odyssey and that kind of stuff. One of the dangers of this is there's like an old Looney Tunes cartoon where where Daffy Duck has to do like the greatest trick in the world, and it basically ends with him blowing himself up because
where he wears the devil costume, and
I kind of feel like we're building to that because we keep having to top ourselves and come up with more and more ridiculous topics to do that like is bigger than the last one. So like Patrick said, we'll eventually run out.
Well, but will we though? Because at one point, and this was now years ago at this point, we so whenever we do a ranking, we declare that it's a definitive ranking, right?
Of course,
And until one time when we went through our previous lists and determined which one of them got to keep their status as a definitive ranking. So, that was a real like navel gazing going back through and being like, did we know what we were talking about? So, we could always go back through the rankings we've done since then and determine whether those are definitive.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. I feel like my brain does not work that way. I need to know, like, if I can plan out exactly what I'm going to be talking about for the next 2 months, that's amazing. If I can get even 2-3 weeks out, like I'm trying to do that. So the fact that like every episode, it's as if you've been thinking about this idea for months. So, kudos to you guys for, I guess that would be the problem. If you had topics planned out for 2 months, then you guys would probably just be going crazy, constantly thinking about like, who am I going to cast as the Invisible Woman from like Nintendo franchise? You would just like drive yourself nuts thinking about these things all the time. So it's probably good to limit yourself. Give me 7 days to think about this topic, or else we'll get kind of lost in the weeds of it. So that's
there's also because Mark and I both have full-time jobs, and the podcast is sort of a thing on top of the rest of our lives. That we are very infrequently in a position to like review something soon enough after it comes out for it to like be relevant. So like we will we try to steer away from just like we're talking about a game. We always want it to be like talking about a game through whatever list or ranking or whatever like that we can lend some artificial structure to it. That's not just reviewing the game.
That's a smart idea, because I'm in the same boat too, where I'm not getting review codes for these games, so it's like
Right.
I'm gonna be late no matter what compared to some other podcasts out there. And that's like you did Kirby month this year when for
Mhm.
I guess anticipation of the Forgotten Land, and that's a smart way to like be topical, still be relevant, but without having to play whatever it is, a 15-hour game in the course of one day, because that's just
Right.
not sustainable.
And not fun.
Yeah, exactly. No one wants to play Kirby like that. That's the worst way to play Kirby. What else was I going to say? I guess the thing is Nintendo always releasing new stuff too. So by the time you're like, okay, I think we're getting out of ideas. Now I know 7 new first party games have come out this year, so you have like a bunch of new material to work with. So you can always kind of keep it fresh that way too.
Yeah. Well, and Nintendo like also just like works in these cycles, right? Nintendo
Yeah.
and Nintendo fandom that like there's always some like new thing in the zeitgeist where it's like, what are people talking about right now? What are people interested in right now? And we're lucky that because we're so into Nintendo, that's usually something that we have a lot of opinions and thoughts about already. So we can like play in that area. We get into trouble when it's like like a Pokemon heavy month, and we're like, okay, because we're both sort of like casual Pokemon fans,
Sure, yeah.
But like otherwise, I feel like we're pretty good between the two of us. One of us is interested in whatever they're putting out.
That's good. And then I think that I think this is partially where the name comes from, is that you guys have this borrowing program where you with your community you'll send out games and stuff. I don't know if is that related at all? Like the name, is that how it started? Okay, well at least it thematically makes sense.
No,
so why don't you talk about what
yeah.
that is? Because I think it's a pretty cool thing to do with your community.
Go ahead, Mark.
Well, yeah, I had never actually made that connection before, because so primarily what we have is what we call the Sonic Forces borrowing program, and that
Which is a perfect program.
It is the perfect program. People can get on a list, and Patrick sends out his personal copy of Sonic Forces that sends it out to somebody. He pays for postage both ways. They can play it for as long as they want or not at all, and then they return it. And then it goes out to the next person. There could be a copy of Untitled Goose Game in there. There's 2 Sonic Forces boxes out in the wild, but one of them includes Untitled Goose Game.
Yeah, that's right.
I feel like I never knew the full lore of that. I guess I'd not paid enough attention. I thought there was just like other different games. Like I never really noticed. I was thinking like the last couple months I've been listening a lot more. I'm like, man, is no one picking up the Sonic Forces thing? Like, why is this the only one in rotation right now? But I guess there you go. That explains it.
That's actually a really good idea, Dylan. Maybe we should start doing that. Just to become like a clearinghouse, like a Netflix for Nintendo games.
That's amazing. I love it. Anything else you guys want to say about your podcast, and then where should people go if they want to check it out, follow along?
Well, I don't know. I think we've covered the topic of our podcast pretty well. Thank you, Dylan, for all the nice things you've said about it. It's always nice to hear that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, if any of that sounds like fun to you, if you want to spend time with me and Mark, you anywhere where you get podcasts, just look for Nintendo Cartridge Society. And we're on Twitter as at NinCart Society. And then we also have a Discord, which has a bunch of people in there who are very chill and very friendly and want to talk about Nintendo stuff, which is also a big part of our brand. That our show is family friendly. We don't swear on the show, and we're never looking to be like negative about something, right? Or like dance on the grave of something that's gone badly. So that sort of extends to our Discord community. So if that sounds like fun to you, you can hit us up on Twitter, and we can send you an invite to get in there.
Cool. And if you guys are ever doing Super Smash Bros. Things, or maybe Fire Emblem, and you need a guest, let me know, because those are maybe my, I don't know, I'd say I'm most knowledgeable on those ones of Nintendo things, but Zelda, Mario, get me in there. I'll join along. So if you want a guest at some point, let me know.
Dylan, I gotta know, what's your favorite Fire Emblem?
My favorite Fire Emblem is the Sacred Stones on the GBA.
Okay. and your Smash main.
So, which one are we talking about here? I've played Melee competitively for several years.
Oh, amazing!
And then I got pretty into Ultimate when it first came out and going to tournaments and stuff. If I had to pick one, though, I'm gonna go with Falcon from Melee. Just that fast pace, the dash dance, and it's a wonderful character. And I think Lucas was probably my favorite from Ultimate when I was playing that one. So
wow,
there you go.
Underdog pick.
Yeah, I feel like people really hate on Lucas for some reason. But he's just, I don't know, I just love the magic. I love how fast-paced he is. I like the mix of, ranged, close range. He's just very fun. Very fun character.
This is great because Mark and I tend to be not super technical players of anything. So we, like when many years ago when we determined the best Pokemon starter, we needed to bring in an expert in Pokemon who could actually like speak to stats and types and stuff, because we were just like, I think this one's cute.
Yeah.
Like, how am I supposed to know what is effective against a fairy type? That doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't know how you're supposed to know
right? I don't know.
So I see what you mean. Okay, I love it. You go check out Nintendo Cartridge Society. I'll throw some links in the descriptions and such so people can easily find that stuff. And with that, let's talk about Mario Kart. So Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, of course, has their booster course pass, whatever the heck they're calling it. This is the second wave that just came out a few days ago, which has 8 new stages: New York Minute, Sydney Sprint, Snowland, Mushroom Gorge, Sky High Sundae, Waluigi Pinball, Calamari Desert, and Mario Circuit 3. Any stage that's really standing out to you guys? Do you have a favorite so far?
That was a chaotic presentation of those names. Was that alphabetical? Is that...
Absolutely not. I was writing them down as I remembered them on my list, so I wouldn't forget one. I think it started, I was like, okay, the 2 tour stages are together,
right.
And then it just descended into
madness. It just felt, yeah. I was trying to like,
but I intentionally left Mario Circuit 3 for last because, I don't know, boring stage. I'm gonna throw it out there. I know you guys don't like to be negative, but like,
it's a weird choice. Yeah.
Give me anything except for this.
I prefer is Mario Circuit 3. I prefer that to whatever the Mario Circuit original Mario Kart track was in there already. I think Mario Circuit 3 is better than that one.
Sure, that's fair. To me, they all blend together in my head. I suppose those like Mario Circuit ones. But yeah, what do you have a favorite so far?
I feel the same way.
Out?
Mark, do you have a favorite so far?
So I think Sky High Sundae is the MVP of the. I actually think that this wave is more memorable than the first one.
Yeah.
I played the first wave and I thought they were fine. I thought like the Ninja Hideout or whatever that last one was called was cool, but it didn't really leave. That wave didn't really leave much of an impression on me. But this one I felt was like a step up in a lot of ways. One, it had Waluigi Pinball, which I love. Nice. I love the changes that they made to Calamari Desert. Yeah. I thought that they were like, so, because that course is like very memorable to me from Mario Kart 64, but it was fun to see them actually like improve it. And then, but I do think Sky High Sundae, I have only been playing it by myself, but it feels like a really good one for online because it feels like it could be extremely chaos.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Yeah, I guess it's got the Rainbow Road effect where there's just often not barricades on either side, and it's in the air, obviously, so you can very easily fall off the side or hit by a shell and fall into an abyss.
Yeah, you take off at the very beginning, and there's that little like donut hole that you have to like land in, and I just don't know what that would be like in multiplayer or like in like a 200cc or something like that.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to go through the ice cream cone if you don't want to.
You can just get an item quicker, I guess, if you go that way, right?
And you get that little bit of a boost of like jumping off of it.
Sure.
But you can just go right for that like landing pad, but you have to like pull back a little bit, otherwise they don't make it.
And you're hovering the whole time in this one too, which I think
it's all zero grab.
First time a course has done that in this game.
I think does Big Blue or one of the F-Zero carts is
that would
maybe
make sense.
Yeah.
Which I think this one though, since those are I forget, are both of those ones like one long track? The F-Zero ones, or at least one of them is.
Yeah, one of them is, but the other one isn't, and I can't possibly remember which is which.
Big Blue, who knows? Yeah, I really like that one too. I also just love the decoration of it. Like it's just all these shops, all these ice cream candy stores on the side. Yeah, I think that one's a lot of fun, and it's a weird one too, right? Because when they first announced this, I seem to remember the messaging of, you know, your favorite courses, beloved courses, courses that you know from these previous games, which this is not. And I guess they're kind of spinning it as like it's coming to tour, but it's not in tour yet. So I think that's kind of strange, but also it's just fun to have a brand new course in this. And I don't know if we should expect much more of that. I mean, I guess Ninja Hideaway, I thought that was in tour, but then I think maybe I'm wrong on that.
It is in tour. It's
Okay.
weird that like I think their sort of like rollout here is 2 courses from tour that are that are based on cities, and then 1 course from tour that isn't, right?
Oh, okay.
So last time we got Tokyo and Paris,
Yeah.
and this time we got New York and Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, Ninja Hideaway last time and Sky High Sunday this time. But yeah, it is cool that like tour being this, you know, constantly updating thing means that it is always getting new tracks.
Right.
So if there's a track that's coming out, like that's coming down the pipe for one of them, it can show up in the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I gotta say, like these tour courses, because I didn't play that at all, so they're all new for me.
Yeah,
all,
same.
I guess 6 of them now, and I mean, I like the design of them because they really seem to look at Mario, like making Mario Kart courses in a different way. In that, like the first lap, second lap, and third lap are all going to be different, but it's not that you're in a like one long course. Like you're just navigating through the level backwards or upside down, or now there's a bridge there wasn't. So I think they're very fun and frantic in that way, and then they're using like what feels like a small space, but just like in a really clever way. And I also feel like they, because of that, maybe have some more replayability, and that I feel like I want to learn what the edges of them are and how I can manipulate them. So I think those might be my favorite one. Like the Sydney Sprint one maybe stands out to me more than New York Minute, but I love both of them. They'd maybe be like the highlight for the bunch for me.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I don't know what it is about like, and I thought the Paris one and Tokyo from the first wave was interesting, and I thought New York was okay, but for some reason there was something about like the Sydney race that I thought was really cool. I do love that they bring this like transformation element to all of them. There's still something that kind of weirds me out about driving through like realistic cities in Mario Kart. But it is fun. Do you think so? You know, like we had Ninja Hideaway last time, and in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, when you're looking at the courses in the cup, you know, in the cup, they say like where they're from.
Yeah.
And it's tour, but then Ninja Hideaway didn't have one. Sky High Sunday doesn't have one. Do you think the fact that we now have one version of each, where Ninja Hideaway was already in tour when it released in Booster Course, and now one where it's premiering in the Booster Pack or whatever, and will be coming to tour. Do you think that like one of those was the intended version? Do you think that they intend for them to premiere in these waves and then show up in tour, but it just got messed up with Ninja Hideaway for like release dates or whatever reason?
It's interesting. It's funny you mentioned that. It's like how like Roy joined Smash Bros before his game technically came out, right? It's like, is Roy a Smash Bros character or is he a Fire Emblem character? You gotta decide. But yeah, it's interesting to me that Ninja Hideaway doesn't have that tour tag. I didn't notice that until I was like booting up the game again this weekend. Like that seems like a really strange choice to me, and I think it kind of lends to what you're saying of that theory of maybe they want it to appear the second way rather than the first way.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to assume that there are a lot of people who are just playing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, that is like their first Mario Kart game. And in getting all of these, you know, repackaged classic tracks that they see, like, oh, this one is from this one is from this. And I wonder if they just like reached a point where they were like, we can't have 6 tracks that say tour on them, right? In the first 2 waves, if they're like, we can do 1 per circuit and like that's it. And then the last one, when they're like, it doesn't look like a city, like we can probably get away with just no tag on this one.
Yeah, I guess the tour branding is like for real life cities brought into the game is how
that's what it seems like to me,
and making it seem like these ones are the not like the Ninja Hideaways and the Sky High Sundays of the world are, I guess, new courses for
something else.
Where they're trying to sell, which is true in this case. It is weird though, the way it's kind of inconsistent.
Can I ask a question about New York Minute?
Of course.
So first of all, an observation. You start off like basically in Times Square, right?
Yeah.
And there are billboards, and there's one of them that just says Donkey Kong Best Musical.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know this. I didn't notice the
Yeah.
musical part. Actually, that's fun.
They better get like to work on producing Donkey Kong Best Musical because I will go see that. But
I thought, wouldn't that be a reference to New Donk City then? Because there's like songs in that game in Odyssey.
Who knows?
Because when I first saw Donkey Kong, I thought they were kind of alluding to King
Mhm.
Kong and that he's always like on the top of towers in New York by the end of the movies and stuff. But I didn't notice the musical part, so that's like my theory is kind of shot in that way.
Patrick, do you think that it's supposed to be one of those like for your consideration posters?
Oh,
like
that
you
could
see
be,
up in
yeah.
LA around the Emmys, or do you think it's just like is that the name of the musical?
I think that's the name
Donkey
of the
Kong
musical.
Best Musical.
Yes, I think it's called
Or
Donkey
it's
Kong
just-
Best Musical.
Because
Okay, go ahead.
I don't remember it off the top of my head, but isn't there a billboard for like another musical that's more like Mario related?
Well,
Ooh.
there are lots of billboards for like Mario work clothes. But I
Oh, maybe that's it.
What, like Mario Builder attire and stuff like that? Is that what you
yeah, well, it's just it's a quality overall that can stand up to some action adventure. But my question about New York Minute was in the third lap, there's a part where you like take a shortcut through the park, and then it looks like you are like going right into a building. And it looks to me like it's supposed to be 30 Rock, but I wanted to know if either of you had a read on what that building was.
I'm not a 30 Rock expert, so that's beyond
Yeah.
me.
I for whatever reason, maybe because I feel like it had like red flooring or like red carpeting when
Yeah.
you go into it. I kind of thought you were going into a theater. I was hoping that the finish line would be on stage of Donkey Kong
That
Best
would
Musical.
be cool.
But didn't turn like a chorus line of Kongs.
I love that.
Don't know. That's interesting. What else is there? I think Snowland kind of surprised me. This is from Game Boy, right? I think that was Game Boy
from
Advance,
GBA. Yeah.
Which I haven't played that Mario Kart, though I should because I love that handheld. But I really like this one. I think this is, other than the tour ones, is maybe my favorite one of the pack. I feel like it's pretty simple. I noticed maybe a couple shortcuts. But I don't know. I even like the GBA one in the last pack too. I can't remember the name of another Sky Kingdom one. But I don't know. I'm just liking the design of those ones, and they're also new to me as well because I never played those games back in the day, or played that one specifically back in the day.
Yeah, it's got a nice like pair of shortcuts right at the end of the track.
Right, like onto the bridge. Right, there's that little ramp.
Yeah. There's a little ramp onto the bridge, and right before that, there's like a little S curve that you can boost.
Right,
if
you
you've
have
got
a
a mushroom
mushroom.
that you can
Yeah.
boost between. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, I feel like that game I have played. Excuse me, I have played the GBA one, but I remember not really liking that game very much. And I know it has a mixed reputation, but it is. I'm enjoying that they're putting these tracks into the game because it is reminding me. It's like, oh yeah. I mean, I honestly can't remember if maybe they've been making a lot of changes to them, but I think it's a nice image rehabilitation for the GBA Mario Kart.
I think I'm partial to the snow maps too in Mario Kart. Like I think Wario's Mountain is the name of that one. That might be my favorite in the whole game. Like I just really like the snow setting, and it's always fun to have some ice in there. And of course those classic Mario 64 penguins are, I don't know what they're doing. They're just walking back and forth.
They're so good. They're so good. Occasionally they flop on their belly and like scoot it around. Yeah, they're wonderful.
We're at the end of the month on our show, we're going to be like ranking all of the tracks in the original 48 tracks in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. So I don't want to tip my hand, but I agree with you. It is an amazing track.
Nice. Yeah, I want to do that when all of them are in there, which I feel like that's going to take 7 hours to do that podcast when you have like what, near 100?
96 tracks.
Yeah, that's going to be insane. But that'll be a fun long episode. And then I got to shout out Calamari Desert because Mario Kart 64 was the one that I grew up playing. It was the first one I played, and I feel like it was always my favorite until Deluxe. But like I always liked Double Dash or the Wii versions or the handheld ones, but like 64 was always my favorite Mario Kart. And so to see this one again is a lot of fun. I just remember too, because I was pretty young when I was playing 64, and I just remember not ever racing on this map. I would just drive around. I'd go on the train tracks. I would just explore. That's what I did a lot. They had that one map that has like Peach's Castle, which is way off the track, but you can just drive there and check it out if you want. I always liked that, and I felt like that. I always got that same enjoyment out of Calamari Desert, where I wasn't even playing the game. I was just having fun in my own world. So it's fun to have that one back. And you said it is different, and I couldn't even tell you the difference because it's been so long since I've played that original version. But they definitely have like a part where you're flying into the sky, right? So that seems like I don't remember that part, especially from the 64.
Well, yeah, and 64 was like my Mario Kart 2, and I did the same exact thing where it was just like, I would put on time trials and just drive around, and you would go on the track and try to go through the tunnel and not get hit by the train, like all that kind of stuff. And so one of the things they added is like, I think it's in the second lap on Deluxe, the track changes and it does take you onto the train track. You have to drive on it, and that is what really like I loved about it, because I thought it feels to me like they also were kids like us, and like it just makes, and so that I
love it.
I think a lot of people like explored, that map and went on the train track when it wasn't part of the intended course, and it feels very deliberate to me that they added that in this reimagining.
And it's so cool that it's like the Mario Kart tourification of these other classic tracks, that like the second lap is different from the first and the third is different from the first two, right? That like that's something that we see so strongly in all of the tour tracks, and then they're just like applying that same logic to Calamari Desert. It makes me feel especially bad about the Choco Mountain that we got in the last wave, which is just like they just play it straight, like it's exactly the same. I remember when my girlfriend and I were first playing Choco Mountain in a Deluxe, she was like, "Oh, is it going to get more foggy with each track?" And I was like, "I don't know, that'd be cool." And of course, it doesn't. But it's really cool to see them. Like it's Calamari Desert is a track that needs no rehabilitation, but they just made it better.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I remember too, like that. Choco Mountain was one of my favorites as a kid, but then when I was playing it again, I was like, oh, this is not exciting actually. And you're right, like it's fun if they take it and like, okay, what was the childhood fantasy of what this map was? Let's make that the new canon version. Do you think you can get on top of the train? Have you guys tried to do that? Like if you're maybe a bit later than other people, you'd I guess be further back, and maybe you could catch that wind onto the top. I'm trying to remember the logistics if that seems possible, but I wonder if you can get on top of the train. It probably wouldn't be good because it's going the opposite way as well, but it would still be a fun challenge to try and do.
But like you can do that in the subway track that you can land on top of the trains, and there are like boosts and stuff on there. Yeah, I wonder. I'm gonna try that now.
I don't remember if I saw anything on top of it, but I've only had the opportunity to play each of these once, so I'm still a little fresh on them. There's a couple more we haven't talked about: Mushroom Gorge and Waluigi Pinball, which I like both of them. I don't know if I have anything like special to say about them, but any thoughts on either of those two?
I'm happy to see.
Yeah, are you happy to see Waluigi Pinball, Mark?
I am happy to see Waluigi Pinball. I love Mario Kart DS, but I'm really happy to see Mushroom Gorge from the Wii
Looks
game.
Beautiful.
It does, and I put so many hours into Mario Kart Wii. I feel like that's another one with kind of like a mixed reputation, but I can't remember a lot of the Wii exclusive tracks, but I definitely remember Mushroom Gorge, and so it is fun to have that one back.
Definitely.
It was cool for both of those, both Waluigi Pinball and Mushroom Gorge, to like have that sort of like muscle memory return to me, whereas like, oh yeah, I know exactly the way this track lays, because I played Mario Kart Wii and Mario Kart DS so much, right? Like that those courses are just in my fingers. So yeah, it was rad to see both of them again, and it's cool to see. I used a horn in Waluigi Pinball, like during like that final bit where there are the balls like bouncing around and the flippers and stuff, and it like knocked one of the balls that was coming at me, knocked it away.
Oh, that is
so
cool.
Like it's cool to see the old elements of the course reacting to a new item in the game.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that, but that's a fun idea. I like that. I think that we will probably get maybe one more set of courses this year. Do you guys think that's fair? I think 2 seems a bit too greedy, but I think there's probably a good chance we see another set this year, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've got 6 packs in total over the and to be done by the end
Right.
of 2023. So, yeah, I would guess we get one more this year. That makes
Nice.
sense.
And I really want to see this. I heard there's a Vancouver course in Tour, which I never played. But as I live here in Vancouver, I really want to see that course because I think they could do a lot of fun stuff with it. And not enough games are set in Canadian cities. I think a lot of game developers over there in America. It's like, okay, let's make this in our backyard. So I want to see that. I'm very excited for that.
I know. I feel like Next Level Games is kind of letting you guys down. They're based in Vancouver, aren't they?
I didn't know that, but that's pretty fun. Actually, I got to
I-
start bragging about that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think they
Go
are. I feel
knock
like
on
the
their
next,
office door, ask them how it's going.
Yeah, the next Luigi's Mansion should be set in British Columbia.
Ooh, I'm down for that. That sounds fun. Okay, that is the Mario Kart Deluxe DLC. I'll be back talking about the next set whenever it does come out. But with that, let's take our first ad break. When we come back, we will get into Live Alive. Okay, we are back. So Live Alive, originally released in 1994, Japan only, and with the remake here, remaster, whatever you want to call it, it is finally, localized in other languages, so it's over here in North America. And I think people kind of describe this as the Chrono Trigger precursor, in that the same director worked on both of those games, and you can see a lot of the DNA for Chrono Trigger here in this game, even though I'm, of course, playing this after I've played Chrono Trigger. It's once again in that 2D HD engine, which Triangle Strategy and Octopath Traveler were in. And I guess, to describe it, it's essentially, I guess we'll say is 7 to 8 short JRPGs that you can complete from anywhere between, I think 45 minutes was the shortest one for me. Maybe 3 hours was the longest one. And you can tackle them in any order. And then at the end, it kind of all connects them in some way. And each of them has a mix of combat, exploration, and dialogue. Some of them have more of one of those things, less of the others, and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm guessing you guys don't have any experience with the originals, but I don't know, maybe you know Japanese or maybe you've played a translated version, but it sounds like this is the first time you're playing it. So I guess just in an overall sense, we'll keep, I guess, some spoilery stuff aside for now. Just in an overall way, what do you guys think about the game? And I guess just briefly, where are you at? How much have you played? We'll start with Patrick. How's that going for you?
Sure. So I finished the game this morning.
Nice.
So the ending is very fresh for me.
Mhm.
And I loved my experience with it. The chapters, the sort of individual sort of an anthology approach to a classic 16-bit style RPG is so perfect. I feel like I'm always looking for that hit of classic RPG, but I can't commit to playing 60 hours of a video game anymore. It's just not my attention span no longer allows it. So being able to spend 2 hours in a single story, be moved by it, feel like I completed something, and then move on to the next one the next day or a week later, and not have to be like, what was I doing again? Was just perfect. And then the way it all, no spoilers, but what comes after those initial 7 chapters is truly something special, and I am excited to talk about that.
Cool. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, so just maybe a few weeks before Live Alive came out, I finished playing Dragon Quest XI-S Echoes of an Elusive Age Definitive Edition for the Nintendo Switch. And that was my first playthrough of it, and I really, for the most part, really enjoyed that experience. But it was such a time commitment, and I was excited for Live Alive, but I was like, I don't know that I have it in me to jump right into another enormous JRPG. And so Live Alive was such a fresh breath of fresh air for me, where it's instead of being a novel, it's a collection of short stories. And I have really, really enjoyed that, because there were definitely chapters that I have enjoyed more than others. And there were a couple of chapters, one in particular, that I was just get me out of here. This cannot end soon enough. But I knew that it's none of these are going to be that long. And so even though, and I have not finished it yet, I am at the final part of it, but the way that it is all kind of like coming together, how well, I'm sure we'll get into more like specifics later, but overall, I am really enjoying it, and even the parts that I didn't enjoy, because there are parts that I did not have fun, I really admire what it's doing. Like I think it's definitely worth experiencing.
Nice.
Yeah, Dylan, I want to hear your take on it too. But I think both Mark and I like mentioned like that it feels like an anthology of short stories. A sort of different comparison came to me earlier today, especially in light of the end of the game. That it almost feels more like reading comics in the run up to like a big line wide event, where you're like, oh, okay, so Batgirl's going to take place in like, it's going to do the Court of Owls thing. Great, I'm going to go back and read Batgirl, and that's like one of the stories. And then the end of the game is like the Court of Owls, right, where you're reading like all of this stuff happening at once, or pick any other line wide crossover. Like it felt very comics to me in the end.
I like that comparison. That's good. And I should probably have mentioned this earlier, but worth mentioning that this game has a demo out on the eShop where you can start 3 of the chapters. I'd say you can play about half of those 3 chapters. So it's a pretty good taste of what the game is. So people should check that out if they haven't picked up the game yet. And then, yeah, I mean, runtime, you're probably going to sit around the 15 to 20 hour range in terms of like to beat the game. I think for most people, it'd probably be around there. You could probably stretch that out a bit if you wanted to. So yeah, I've beaten the game too. I'm gonna say I beat it with air quotes because I got like a bad ending, and then I looked up like how, like, I'll just say that I got a bad ending because the final boss like just destroyed me, and so I'm like, okay, well, I don't know if I am gonna be able to beat this guy with my current set of characters and gear. And after I looked it up, people are like, oh yeah, you should be such level to fight this thing, and I was like way under that. And, I was pretty burnt out by the combat, and I didn't really feel like going on that journey with it. So I cheated. I watched a YouTube video of the good ending because I wanted to see what it was. But I had felt like, okay, there's nothing really for me to be gained here except for grinding for maybe another couple hours to get my levels high enough to do this. And I wasn't really too into that. So I think really that's my biggest complaint with the game is not even the combat, because I like the system. We'll dive into it, but I just think the frequency of it is tuned way, way higher than it needs to be. There's way too much of it for how much depth there is, and there is really no way to skip it in a meaningful way. You can like flee from battles, but that takes a while for it to load into the battle, for you to flee, for it to load out, for you to move on, and then just 5 steps later, you're in another battle. So we'll talk about that. But overall, I really enjoyed the game. I think there's maybe a couple of the stories that fell flat for me, but then the other ones I either really enjoyed or loved them. There's a couple that are just super standout for me. And as soon as it was done, I was like, man, I want a chapter 2 of this right now. I want to dive into this full game. I think they succeeded in that way. And I wonder if they would ever do that. Like, I think if this game was a huge success, I could totally see them. I mean, I don't know where that director is these days making games, but I think that would be interesting if they took maybe some of these stories and branch them out into a full experience.
Yeah, well, because it's not even just like different stories, right? That it's like different gameplay types too, right? Like each chapter prioritizes like a different part of the RPG experience, right? Like in the Wild West, the majority of that chapter is you like preparing the town for an invasion by bandits, right? And so like the majority of that game is really just like, or of that section of the game is just running around a little village looking for ways to outfit your little town. And like no other chapter in the game does that, right? And like the far future is almost solely narrative experience. And yeah, like it's that truly they feel like separate games, and it's a miracle that they can merge them into something even approaching one thing at the end.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I mean, I didn't do it, truthfully, but watching that good ending, like that is very cool. And even that last chapter when you are recruiting everyone together, I thought that was really fun. It's cool that you can you choose which character you want to start the journey off with, and you're going through, which kind of feels like an Octopath Traveler kind of thing too. Funnily enough, even though of course that came out in 2017 after this, but I think. you can see a lot in like a lot of games taking influence from this game, assuming that this is accurate to what the original game was, minus the graphics. And I think they re-recorded music for it and
they did.
touched it up in some ways, because listening to some of the original tracks sounds a lot different too. But yeah, I think it's great. Truthfully, I think that the fact that they have a demo is fantastic, because that will tell you if you want to get this game. I think if you liked that demo and you want more of that, then that should be your like whether or not you buy the game or not. I think that's, in terms of the review, that's what I'd say. I'd say the price is totally fair for what you're getting here. And I love that HD 2D engine. This game looks fantastic. Some places in particular, I just was taking screenshots galore, because I love to look at some of these certain frames and stuff like that. And then the music, I mean, even before we were getting ready for the podcast today, when I was setting stuff up, I just like have my Switch here. I was on the jukebox and I was just jamming to a couple of the songs, because they are great. So big shout outs to the music for sure.
I hit a few bumps in the music that I think, generally speaking, the music is good, but every now and then there's a track where I'm like, oh gosh. Particularly the main Wild West theme, that like whistle, that like I was like, oh my god, this thing. It's just like it's so like tinny and trying.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the main boss theme, the Megalomania, that plays every time you encounter like the chapter's final boss, every time you fight Odio, rules. And like every time it kicked in, I was like, yes, let's go.
Nice. Before we jump into an individual chapter and discuss that way, let's talk about just some overall things. So I want to talk about the combat a bit, because I mentioned this, and I do think it's cool in structure. It's got you're fighting on a grid, which is, I think, 10, maybe 15 tiles by 15 tiles. And it is kind of turn-based, but it's sort of chrono triggery in that everyone has like a speed stat, and that determines when you're going to go next. So it's not just like my turn, enemy's turn, or all of my characters' turns, and then all the enemies' turn at once. It's kind of dependent on your speed stat. So you're moving around this grid, kind of doing turn-based stuff, and then just picking moves from a list, that sort of thing. Enemies have weaknesses and strengths to certain type of abilities, and then certain characters and moves are putting, traits like fire or water, electricity down on the map that will affect things too. And I gotta say, I like this combat in general, but I just feel like it maybe lost some of the. It just doesn't have tons of depth to it, which, for the most part, it doesn't need to, because you're in this one story for 2 hours, maybe doing 15 battles or something. Like, it doesn't need that depth. But then for me, it was really with Chapter 8 where I was like, oh god, this is so much combat. And I think the problem is, like, they kind of have it set up like, okay, in this random encounter, the enemies are going to be here, here, and here. And so you'll just keep encountering that exact same battle over and over again.
And you just
so
execute it the same way.
Yeah, I just felt like I was doing the same thing over and over again. And generally, I think the game's very easy, which, once again, I'm okay with. But, when then I'm not having to really think about things and I'm just, going through the motions, I think that's where I kind of got burnt out on it a bit, especially near the end. So where are you guys at with the combat? You feel similarly, or did you like it?
I did not like the combat. So like the stories where I did not have to, I basically played all of the stories, which is biting me in the butt right now, where I like did not do combat basically at all. And so like in Edo, Japan, I played a no kill run. In like the Wild West and like even Imperial China, like those were some of the earliest chapters that I played, and I was like, oh, like combat, I don't even really understand what combat is in this game. And then I got to the near future, and
it makes you fight.
My near future experience is what you experienced in Chapter 8, where I was like, I hate this. Like this cannot end soon enough for me, because I just felt like it was so tedious and required like so much grinding. But weirdly, when I got into Chapter 8, I really, really dug the story and like the world of Chapter 8. And so even though it was tedious, I stuck with it because like the narrative around it was interesting to me. But yeah, like I what is weird about Live Alive and why I think it is a worthwhile experience for people who don't even like JRPGs even though you will have to go through moments where you're going to have to like grind and do the annoying JRPG stuff, is that for the vast majority of it, the combat system is almost like an afterthought. And so when you do have to engage with it, it's for the first time, it's a little jarring. But then if you're like me and you didn't engage with the combat system in a lot of the chapters, you get to the final world where it does matter what level your characters are, and you're like, oops, this just got a lot harder.
That's interesting. And even like on the menu, there's like 4 or 5 things on the menu, and one of them is formation. And for the first 7 chapters, I was like, I've never clicked this, and I have no idea why I ever would. But then it's like, oh, chapter 8, you got to be using this. So it's interesting that that's one of the big icons on the map the whole time, even though it does not matter in most of the stories up until that ending point.
All of this is so funny to me because like that is, for me, the trajectory of all JRPGs, that like the combat is you sleepwalk through it for the first like 10 hours, right? Where you're just like, I don't know, just attack. I don't know. Is this guy weak to fire? Okay, use fire. And that like, that's like every Final Fantasy game. That's every Dragon Quest game.
Right.
And then at some point the game starts to push back. And it's like, no, I'm not as easy as you think I am. Which is true in the end game of Live Alive. And so it's not just like having to level up, which like is definitely a part of it, but also just like I have to understand the way the combat system works. I have to prioritize like interrupting characters when enemies when I know that they're like they're about to use like a powerful thing. It's like, okay, I need to use something that knocks them away a space because then it'll cancel out their attack, and I have to not make my guys do something that has a charge up time when another enemy is in a position to interrupt them. So yeah, like there's depth there, and the game does not make you engage with the depth until it does. And that's a rough transition. But I think the game is better for it after the transition.
I like that description. That's good. I feel like too, I feel like you can just cheese almost every fight in this game by maneuvering around and stuff like that. So I don't know if I think that's a good or bad thing. Usually in boss fights, you maybe can't do that as much, although I feel like there's a couple bosses that I just had some move that knocked them back 1 square, and they could not figure out how to possibly counter this move. So even though it was doing 10 damage, I could just keep doing that all day long, and they would never learn. One thing I really like that I haven't really seen this system in a game before that I can recall is that when your character hits 0 HP, they get knocked out, so they're like on the ground. They have a halo over their head, but they I guess at that point they have like 1 more health. You can't act with them anymore. They're just on the ground, but you can still heal them, and then they're back in the fight. And I really like that because rather than like, okay, my character's low HP, I should drop whatever I'm doing to go try and heal them. It's like, okay, I can let them drop into that state first, and then I can decide if I want to deal with it later. And then there's no permadeath either, so it doesn't matter if they do actually die. So I really like that, and I feel like, once again, like just the idea of combining a timing / speed stat based turn-based game that's on a grid. Like there's a lot that's going on there, and it is very interesting. And I think if they were making one game that's 20 hours long rather than 8 games that are 2 hours long, I think it could have been really cool if they expanded on the idea more, but it's hard to, and your characters in each chapter could be anyone's first chapter, and so it has to be pared down to a lower level of difficulty.
I also
go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say that I loved, like you said, the that kind of like one last hit mechanic, because it does change tactically. The other thing that kind of changed things tactically for me is that in this game, after every battle, your HP resets.
Oh, I love that so much.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
I love it. It's amazing.
Same.
Perfect.
Like,
every game copy this.
Exactly.
Not every game, but a lot of games.
But it really did change the way that I approached it, because it's like, oh, I don't really have to worry that much about my character's like health. Like once we can just scrape by in this battle, and it's totally fine. Because even if I have an encounter 2 seconds later, it all starts over. And that was like a big revelation. I like that. I also like that there was no like magic points. Because as you level up, you're learning more and more abilities, and the way they balance it is like some enemies are like weak to those abilities, and some of them are going to be resistant to it. So you can't necessarily just like spam one attack over and over for the most part. But especially in the more combat heavy levels. But I just thought that those were like such niceties in a game that like for 90% of it, the combat system just feels like perfunctory.
Yeah, well, and like that's coupled with the fact that there are no stores in this game, right? Like you never, there's no currency, and you never have to spend gold on potions or whatever because the game just heals you up after you finish a fight, and there are, like you said, no magic points, so there's no reason for you to buy an ether or whatever.
Yeah, you don't have to run back to the Pokemon Center after every battle.
Yes,
pop
exactly. Save anywhere, like it's very friendly in that way, right? Like the game wants you to just keep experiencing it and takes out a lot of those like weird roadblocks that are present in so many RPGs from that era and since.
And I feel like too that system of one, not having mana points or magic points that you're having to spend, and the lower consequences of doing poorly in a fight just makes it so you can experiment more with things. Like anytime you get a new ability, like, oh, I'll try this out because even if it doesn't do what I need it to do and I take more damage for it, it's like that's fine. And it's not like, okay, I have to save 50 magic to use this thing, so I'm going to save it for the last moment. It's like you can just spam your best move every single turn if you want to, and then it might be, maybe it has like one of those charge times on it, so it's not necessarily a good idea, but I just feel like in general it lets you experiment with the moves that you have, so I think that's a pretty good way to do it too.
It's cool the way it approaches the idea of cost for those moves, right? Like you say, there are some that have that charge up, so it's like, okay, there's a risk associated with using it, but there are also some moves that after you use them, like some of your stats drop, so you're like, okay, well, when do I want to use Pogo in like his end game? He has a move called Bing Bang Bong, which is just him swinging his club. It's like 6 times, and against a regular enemy, each hit will deal like 150 to 200 damage. So it's like a huge damage dealer. But afterwards, all of his stats go down. So like you can open that way if you want to, but then he's going to be less effective for the rest of the fight. So it's just cool that in the absence of like magic points or whatever, they find a different way to make the moves cost something.
Yeah, and I think too, there's a lot of the lower level fights, the goons, and fighting them that was, I'm not going to say too easy, but it was easy. I didn't really have to think too much and could check stuff out. But I got to say, like, the boss fights, each chapter ends with a boss fight, and I think almost all of those completely landed for me in one being difficult, but also just that pixel art, man. I was just like mesmerized by this amazing art. And most of them had like some gimmick to it, and they're huge. They take up like whatever 3x3 tiles, sometimes 4x4, I think. So they take up a lot of the map. So it's less about like fandangling individual positioning and more about just like this grandiose boss fight. And like it succeeds at making like these epic encounters, even though if this one's your first one or your 7th one, they're all going to be kind of equally cool. So I think that's something that really, and even if it doesn't make sense, like in the fighting chapter, there's like, you're just fighting some other regular human. Yeah. And then for some reason, in the boss fight, he's like, he took a bunch of mushrooms, Mario mushrooms, and he's a huge version of himself. So I think they definitely succeeded on the boss fights, even if, I said the final boss fight of the game was way too hard for me and I couldn't even beat it. But, with the exception of the balance of that one, I got to say, like, those boss fights nailed it.
I love that final boss fight. I would love to talk about it too, but go ahead, Mark.
I was just gonna say, I really liked in chapter 8, like the gauntlet of bosses to get to like the final boss. I really loved chapter 8. Like, I feel like there are a lot of really effective stories in Live Alive, and each individual chapter, again, for the most part, like is taking a genre and kind of playing with the tropes of that genre. And I thought chapter 8, the middle, like, does it brilliantly. Like, I loved, and that was one, Dylan, where after chapter 8 ended, when I saw that I could like choose characters again to start with, I was so tempted to continue that character's story because I thought it was I just thought it was really cool.
Yeah. Well, Mark, what's so cool about that 8th chapter is that not only like all the rest of them are playing like very specific tropes, and then the 8th chapter takes what you expect from the previous 7 chapters and like does an inversion on it. which like story wise makes it so powerful and so strong that like, yeah, you know, you have the option to play it as play the end game as any of the other characters or the character from chapter 8. And we're being so cryptic here. I love it.
Yeah.
And his story, the chapter 8 character story, is like an alternate path, right? And the other 7 do like kind of one thing. And it's that's the one thing I still have yet to do is like go back and play his version of the end game.
Right. So I'm kind of down to get into some of the individual chapters.
Yeah.
Where do we want to start? I'm gonna put you on the spot, Patrick. Pick a chapter. With the exception of, let's start with let's go through 1 through 7 first.
Yes.
In whatever order. But yeah, why don't you pick one? Where are we going first?
Sorry, Patrick. Before you do that, I would just be super curious, Dylan. What order did you do them in, or where did you start? Which one drew you in?
Yeah, so I did play the demo. I guess I didn't finish the demo, so I think in the demo I started in Japan, and then I went and did the China one, and I forget what is the third thing in the demo? Did you guys play the demo?
I didn't play it.
Okay.
Yeah. We were both I'm buying this game. You know?
Actually, I think it's Far Future, the one where you play as Cube. So I only played those first 2, and so that's weird, right? Because I'm playing what is like essentially an hour of each of those. But then when I got the full game, I'm like, I really want to play the Wild West. And then I went to the Wild West first, and then I think from there I went finished Japan, finished China, and then I started going through them like one by one. And I left Prehistoric to last specifically because I just heard really good things about that one, and I was like, okay, I want to save the best for last, even though I know there's more after chapter 7. But that's maybe a good question. Like, what was your path? And I'm guessing you played through like them one at a time, rather than like saving halfway through one and continuing. That feels like a weird way to play it, but the demo kind of forces you to do that a little bit.
Miraculously, Mark and I also both started with Wild West.
Okay.
Without consulting each other.
I think it's such like a cool setting, and you don't see many RPGs in that setting, that I was immediately like, "Ooh, I want to see what this is like."
I love it. That's amazing.
Mark, you went back and forth a little bit, right? Because you had to like quit out on the near future chapter.
So I did Wild West, then Imperial Japan, and then I started Near Future. And because in Imperial China and Wild West, when I did those 2, and you don't really, in Imperial China, you do and have the opportunity to engage with the combat system if you really want. But I found that all I had to do was just spam like Wild Fox's Grace over and over and over again. And so it was like, okay, I don't get what combat is in this game. But then I jumped into Near Future where like, and so I was playing it like those first 2 where it's like, I don't have to do any encounter. I'm just going to slide right through this, and hit a wall where it was like, oh crap, I'm not leveled enough. And my robot companion like does not have any power-ups. And I was so frustrated. I was like, okay, I'm going to quit out. And then I went and did like the other chapters, and then came back and did Near Future at the very end. Okay. Or as like the last of my 7.
My path, and I had to pull it up. I did Wild West, and then Twilight of Edo Japan, and then Far Future, and then Present Day, Ancient China, Near Future, and Prehistory.
Nice. Saving Prehistory for last.
Saving it for last.
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
Did you hear? Is that for the same reason as me, that you heard it was a good one or something, or did you just for whatever reason choose that to be the last one?
I don't know. There was something about it that felt like fundamental, right? That felt like a key identifying like part of this game, or maybe just something special, right? Like there aren't other caveman RPGs, just like there aren't any other like Wild West RPGs. So like I started with something unique and ended with something unique.
Yeah, I guess I also, have you guys played Chrono Trigger, by the way? I've mentioned that a couple times, but so I love that sequence of Chrono Trigger too, and I think that's fun that this director just seems to really like that time period. He's introduced it in both of his games now. But yeah, I think for that reason too, I'm like, I really like that sequence in Chrono Trigger, so I'll probably like it in this one.
My favorite piece of video game writing of all time is when you first get to the prehistoric era of Chrono Trigger, and one of the random cavemen is trying to give you tips about how to fight now that you're in this new era, and he says thunder stun all dinosaur,
Yeah,
I just love it.
We got to talk about the writing of Prehistory at some point here too.
Yes,
I mean writing, I'm using it loosely, but Anyway, yeah, where do you want to start then, Patrick?
Let's start with the Wild West.
Cool, that makes sense. Yeah, this one, I feel like this is maybe one of the shorter ones, or hey, at least in terms of the structure, it's pretty simple. You mentioned it earlier that essentially you just get introduced into this place as like an outlaw who's come to this town, but then the town needs your help. I got a shout out right away. Like this, I don't think it's not necessarily the opening scene, but maybe the second or third scene where you're in the bar, and it just like, I don't know, it feels like Tarantino's Hateful Eight or something, where you're in this bar and someone like picks a fight with you and you're talking about milk and you're like shit talking each other. And then like the barkeep's daughter comes from down, she's like yelling at everyone. And then this kid walks in the room and he's freaking out. And then the mayor comes in and then some other guy comes in and challenges you. It's just, it's absolutely wild.
And the sheriff is a putz.
Yeah. I love that, like that scene. And there's, of course, there's a mariachi band on the side who's just playing songs the whole time.
Yeah, they rule.
Some other table of like other kids just chilling. Super weird and very strange, but I don't know, it really like set the tone for me, and it introduced you to the whole town in one scene. I thought it was very fun. I really liked that sequence of it.
Yeah, I like the I like the structure of that chapter conceptually. I think more than I actually enjoy playing it, because like it is the sort of Magnificent Seven Samurai thing of like just preparing the town for they're going to be outnumbered and outgunned, but what do they have that will help them to defend the town? So like there's a sequence where it's 8 bells until they're going to show up, and you're just like looking for bottles that you can make Molotov cocktails out of, and a shovel to dig traps, like a girly poster to like hang on a wall to distract someone, and then you have to assign each of the townsfolk to like, you use this one, and that'll like thin out the ranks before the final fight, and mostly it's just rewarding to see them do it and like actually execute the plan, but when you're preparing it, it doesn't have any of the fun of like a Home Alone getting ready montage, but it's very cool to see it all executed.
Definitely. Where are you at, Mark, with this chapter?
Yeah, I thought it was a really good introduction to the game, in the sense that you're like, oh, this is not an RPG as I like think of RPGs. It's there is a little bit of combat in it, especially in like that final boss battle, but it's not really, that's not the focus of it. It's more just like telling this story and having this experience. I will say that it did introduce me really early to this idea that it's like, man, I wish I could watch these cutscenes on like 1.5 times speed. Like I wish, like, because you have the option to skip the cutscenes, and I don't really want to do that, because a lot of the joy in Live Alive is watching like the cutscenes and experiencing the story of it. But boy, do I wish I could speed it up a little bit, because I feel like the pacing can sometimes be a little plodding, with lots of pauses in between like every action. But yeah, I just felt like it was a really good introduction to Live Alive, in that it just makes it very clear that this is not, like a RPG in the vein of Final Fantasy.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes they swear.
Yeah,
that's right. They swear so much in the Wild West chapter.
We haven't really talked about that, but there is a very distinct humor to this game. There are a ton of fart jokes in this game. Very, like, some of the humor works for me. Others is just, it's just kind of weird to see. Yeah. I don't know. It feels like off-putting in a way. Nothing's, like bad-hearted or anything like that. It's just kind of strange at times. But yeah, I think there is definitely humor to this particular scene as well. And you mentioned like the kind of long cutscenes there. Shoutouts to Triangle Strategy. I don't know if you guys played that earlier this year, but that had that feature where you can like speed through cutscenes, which is really nice. So obviously this engine is capable of it. I don't know exactly how that kind of stuff works, but same engine and all that. I felt that too for this boss fight, because I struggled on this one. I think it took me maybe 3 or maybe 4 tries, and there are a lot of like unskippable cutscenes part of that. And I felt like the auto saving is kind of weird, where you have to start like back during the 8 bells countdown, and also that's kind of weird too, because you can't like save right at the end of that. I just had to keep trying to save as close as when I thought that bell was going to ring, which is very weird to have to do. Like the auto save should put you right there at the boss fight again, in my opinion. And I was worried that would be a big issue throughout the game, but I honestly think that was the worst occasion of it in the whole game, was that sequence. So thankfully the autosaving wasn't too bad other than that. But yeah, I liked that boss fight. It just the cutscene part of it was a bit savage, I felt. So I don't know why they made the choice like that. It seemed like kind of strange to me.
Yeah, it's a little weird. I like also that this one has like one little beat of story after the boss fight. Because like the way the chapter starts is that like you're being pursued by a man in black, right? And it's revealed that like these two guys have been, or he's been chased, forever by this one bounty hunter. And even after like you work together to fight the bad guy, then the game is still like, okay, now these two guys got to have a showdown. You got to fight who's basically been your friend, and then you just shoot him in cold blood and ride off into the sunset. It's brutal.
It's very classic. And yeah, I mean, as you guys mentioned, I just like the setting here because it's something different than what we're used to from these kinds of games. And I don't know, even just walking around the town and picking up items is not the most enthralling gameplay, but I don't know, I loved the design of the saloon and the different buildings and stuff like that. So I really enjoyed this chapter, and I mean, yes, it technically wasn't my first, but it was the first one I played from start to finish, I suppose, and I think it is a good scene setting. And I'm curious, I'd love to see the stats of everyone who's played this game. Of who played what chapters in which order, because if all three of us did Wild West, I mean, that's got to be, I don't know, that's got to be something to that. And a lot of people must be drawn to that one. And I got to say, like, even from the marketing, that was like a big reason I was interested. I was like, that just seems so cool. I really want to check out that chapter in particular. It stands out, we're not used to it, so that was cool. Any last notes on Wild West? I feel like we kind of talked about the big major beats of it, but anything else?
There was one thing that happened in the Wild West chapter that I never really got like closure on, or never really understood. Right as as morning comes, and you've set all your traps and you're ready for the bad guys to invade, there is a father and son who approach the town, and the father gets gunned down by the bandits, and the son bursts into tears. Makes sense, right? And like runs off, and like that's it. I don't know if it's just to establish them as especially bad guys or what. But it felt like a little dangling thread to me.
It's weird, and I don't know if you guys noticed this too, but a very similar thing happens in the Middle Ages, and it's a very similar looking kid. Like, I think it's a blonde kid with like a blue jumpsuit or something, and I think his dad is slain in a battle or something. Then he comes on stage and is crying about it, and then he leaves, and I don't think you ever see that character again. So I don't know what's up with that, but I feel like they did it twice.
Yeah, what's going on? What's
is it
going
supposed
on?
to be like a South Park kind of thing where it's like, Kenny always dies? Is like for some reason in every era, this random kid, the lineage of this kid, his father dies for some reason. It was very bizarre. That stood out to me too, that it never really gets resolved, and he just drags his father's body off into the sunset.
The animation of this little of the sprite of this kid weeping, the tears are so big. They're so big.
Yeah.
I also thought, so in the Wild West chapter, I thought that it was going to be like a story about like kind of like redemption for the sheriff, because he's a coward, and I kept expecting that moment where he's like, no, I'm going to stand with you. And he does that, but then your character is like, no, you don't have to. And he's like, well, okay, then I'm not going to. See you later.
Yeah, and
then
you just leave town with his sheriff badge.
Yeah.
And then you still have that badge when you go into chapter 9, whatever it is.
You never give it back.
It does nothing, has no stats. It's just that you just still have this badge. You bring it with you.
Oh, you better believe I never took that off.
Yeah, you got to keep that. With that, let's take our second ad break here, and then we'll come back and talk about the next set of chapters. Okay, we are back. I want to talk about Near Future, because, Mark, you didn't like this one. This was my favorite. This was my favorite timeline. I really liked it, so I want to talk about it. One, I mean, I do think it is maybe the longest one, so and to me, it used that well. Like, I didn't feel like there was tons of bloat in this chapter, where I do feel like that is the case in some other chapters with maybe having too much combat, or in one chapter where you're just walking back and forth a whole lot. We'll talk about that in a bit. But I really liked this one. I really liked the characters. And for me, it was darker than the other one, so that stood out to me as well. I mean, it's bright and colorful and beautiful, but in terms of the themes of, the orphanage that you grew up in gets burned to the ground, and there's this storyline where your little sister is sick and is willing to, even though she's like 8 years old or something, is willing to sacrifice herself for the plan that would be to take down the bad guy. And then even just this storyline that there's this underground scientist society that is capturing people and also children and then turning them into goo, like turning them into liquid. It's
to control
very,
robots.
Yeah, like it's very, it's these things are seen maybe framed as like playful fun scenes, except for maybe the orphanage burning, but it is much darker. So I don't know. I really like the story and the vibe here. I liked walking around the city and all that. So yeah, this was definitely my favorite.
It's the genre here that it's playing in, right, is like sort of a mix between like anime and like Saturday morning cartoon, right? And
Definitely.
like it opens with a cartoon theme song, like that like none of the rest of them do this. It has like its own title sequence, which is very cool and
With
very
the
fun, very
eyes,
funny. Yeah, yes, that's right. And it's got this like tragic Batman-esque bat story or backstory. I said bat story.
That works.
But yeah, I liked this one too. Even if like the genre isn't one that I really connect with now. I liked its focus on the combat. And Akira is such an interesting character from a combat perspective, because he has all of these like area of effect attacks that and they've got such funny names too, where like one of them is like shame of your parents or something like that.
Yeah, like Mother's Nightmare.
Yeah,
I think.
that's right.
Something.
Yeah, and like fear of death. All of these things, all of these psychological things, that because his thing is that you can press Y to read characters' minds, which isn't super useful because like everyone is either cryptic or telling you exactly what they mean anyway.
I still liked it. It's
still fun. It's still fun. But yeah, that it's all like kind of centered around this like psychic ability of his.
Mark, explain yourself. What is it about this chapter?
So I think that if I had played it in a different order, that I might have liked Near Future more, or if I had been paying more attention and like understood what I was supposed to do in Near Future. Because I played it third after 2 chapters where like I didn't have to pay any attention to the combat. That jumping right into this one, I got myself into a corner where it was like, oh, so basically, when you go into the Institute and at the very close to the end, you have to fight that like you go through the double doors after you get the code and you have to fight that robot.
Yeah.
And I got to that robot and I was like way under leveled. I hadn't been collecting robot parts, or if I had, I didn't understand that I was supposed to be using them to level up my robot, because I was just kind of like jamming through it like I jammed through the first 2 that I played. And so I got to that point and I was like, well, crap. Like I found out later that if you sneak behind the robot and punch him in the back, it's like a one-hit kill.
Oh, amazing.
But
which I mean, I like that too, because when you first get introduced to that robot, he enters the scene from, I guess you could say, bottom going up, and like you can see his back is like this big red thing. And so like it took me a few turns, but I was like, oh yeah, I seem to remember on his back seemed like something was going on. And then there's also a scientist that you can talk to who mentions some line that's like the circuitry on this robot's back. I forget exactly what the line is, but it hints at it too. So I see what you mean, because if I didn't pick up on that or didn't figure that out after a couple turns, I would have been like, well, this is a stupid difficulty spike. But I thought it was cool that I felt like I was kind of rewarded for doing extra dialogue and stuff.
I fought that thing honest. I wish I would have known.
Yeah, really, that must have been a grind to fight.
It was tough. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that is really cool, because I like was not paying attention to that sort of thing, but that they put it in there to discover, I think is awesome. But yeah, so like because I hit that wall, and for me it felt like it was like a ton of dialogue, and I was just like, I do not like it. There were elements in it that I just felt like, why are you making me do this? Like when you have to run down all of those stairs in the scientist's like layer, and then you have to run all the way, and you do that multiple times. I'm just like, why are you wasting my time like this?
Do that kind of thing for sure.
And so that's when I was like, oh, I really wish that I could again just like play these just speed it up, and so that way I don't miss out on it. When I came back and I understood what I was supposed to do and I paid a little more attention to the combat, I still kind of found it annoying, but maybe at that point it was because I was just trying to like hurry through the elements I'd already seen. But like you mentioned earlier, Dylan, that having these random encounters with just like side enemies and them having the same formations that it just feels like you're doing over and over. That was the chapter where that really got to me, where I was just like, you've got to be kidding. So I don't, it was with my experience, like my least favorite chapter, probably.
I think that's all totally fair, and I was just teasing you when I was asking, to explain yourself. But
no, make him explain himself. That's okay.
For me, I guess what made the combat here, even though you're right, like there is a lot of that same setup over and over again, but I just really like the setup of having Akira, who's the protagonist, who has kind of larger crowd control sort of moves, but then he's also the healer of the group, and then you have Taro. I forget his full name, but Taro's like this weird turtle mech creature, and he has like a very specific set of moves, but he's kind of set up as the tank, so he has the counter attack, so you want to kind of get in your opponent's face, but he also doesn't have a direct melee move, so you can't always just be right in their face. And then I don't really know where Lawless fits in there. He's just like, I feel like cannon fodder. I would just throw him in there when I needed to burn a couple turns to do some other stuff. But
he's got some good distance attacks too,
right.
So you could hold him back.
But yeah, I just really liked that trifecta of using those three characters together. I thought they had a fun dynamic, and even when you didn't have Lawless with you, it was still fun. I guess I also just like the variety of the fights there. Like there was the kind of self-destructing robots, and I don't know, just different enemy types that I feel like kept the variety good for me. Another difference with this character is that he has a teleport instead of flee, which I don't know if I really noticed this doing much until Chapter 9 is when I used it once, and then I ended up in a very strange place that took me a long time to get out of, and oh my god, there were so many fights in that.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's well, we'll talk about Chapter 9 later, as to not spoil anything, but
yeah. And then I mean, one other small note for me is that one of the things you're doing is, well, I guess you're not really doing this as part of the main story, but that crazy scientist guy who has a very weird joke about like him going to the bathroom and then not washing his hands, and then since you can read minds, that he's doing this, so you're like telling him to. Very, very strange humor. But he has like a teleporter that he's using that breaks, and then you never really use it after that. But I thought, once again, that's like the start of Chrono Trigger, is that there's a broken teleporter that takes you places. So once again, I like seeing the kind of parallels between some of the like creative decisions of these things. And then, I also thought that the end of the game, or the end of it too, when you start to play as the Steel Titan, and that's a totally different move set, and that's, a big, kaiju battle essentially at the end. Like, I just loved it. I think everything about this one worked for me. I love the music in this chapter, the overworld, the art style, like just everything worked. So this was, definitely my favorite of them all.
That final boss fight is so funny, because you're in the Steel Titan, and I just spammed the what is it? It's like a Halcyon beam or whatever it was,
right?
Just did that one over and over again, but it's the only time that you get to control a character that takes up like 9 spaces, and so it's just a very it's a very novel thing to get to like drive one of those.
And then, my last note on this one, which is a wild storyline, is that there's like this robot can only be controlled by someone with certain telekinetic powers. So it's like, okay, well, my character's going to do this at some point. But then Lawless controls it by going to the bar and getting this like mango alcohol and just getting insanely drunk. And that's like how he's able to control it. But then it's like, you're going to kill yourself if you keep doing this. So once again, just the humor here, I don't know. It works and it doesn't, but this particular thing I just thought was hilarious. And also when you go to that bar and everyone's just like zombies for this mango alcohol drink.
They love it.
They love that drink. Where do you want to go next, Mark? You can pick now. Where are we going?
Let's go to Edo, Japan.
Let's do it. What about this one? What do you like about this one?
So this is another one that you have the option of being combat heavy, and I'm interested to hear how you guys played it. But basically the main framing device is that you're a ninja or some sort of like...
Yeah. What's the exact wording? I forget, but something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're like breaking into this palace to try to rescue another person that's there and break them out. And, you have and so basically the majority of, or the entire level is just like exploring this one dungeon, and you have the option of playing it like you can kill nobody, you can try to kill like everybody, you can split the difference, and there's kind of rewards for playing one style or the other. But yeah, I went through it entirely combatless. Not combatless because there are some fights that you have to do, and
That's what I
also
thought, yeah.
if you kill like spirits or animals, they don't, it doesn't count as like kills.
Oh.
It's only
okay.
humans, so that's how you level up. Is there's a room like a storehouse that has like some spirits that float, and if you like walk in and out of it, they respawn.
Smart.
And then there's some other things with throughout it that like you can do the fight, but it doesn't count as killing. And so that's how you level up enough to at the very end when you're forced into a boss battle, you have to kill. But you get some rewards along the way for like having not killed anybody.
What are those rewards? I'm curious. Because I was kind of the split the difference guy. I
same.
started out, I'm like, I don't want to kill anyone, but then I killed one or two, and there's like, okay, 3.
You're like, all right, now everyone's good.
Double digits. Like, okay.
There's one room that you can go into where there's like an old monk there, and he asks, you know, like if you're pure of heart or something, and if you haven't killed anybody, he just gives you some good armor, or like something like that. And then later, if you haven't killed any of the maidens, like close to the end of the game, a maiden will like run in from the side and be like, wait, this is for you, and she gives you like a good item. And then if you wait a little bit, you keep going, then she'll run back again and be like, no, this is actually what I meant to give you, which is like an even better item. So
That's
it's
cool.
nothing like it's nothing game changing, but it is helpful because you're probably a little bit under leveled going into that boss fight if you haven't done any of the combat, or if you haven't like killed any humans. So in that way, it was like helpful, and it was nice that there was some recognition of playing that way.
Can I just say how much I love that, like here, and we'll talk about it in the Ancient China one, that there are like fundamental huge choices that you get to make within these chapters. Like not only can you approach the chapters in whatever order you want, but there are a couple of them where you can like fundamentally play them in different ways than other people are. And so like the fact that you had this like sneaky mission, and I was, I tried to sneak for the first like 5 minutes, got caught, and was like, well, okay, now I fight whoever comes my way.
Yeah.
But like that you can also come away with like a different earthen master at the end of the Ancient China chapter is so cool.
Yeah, I agree. And I also like the stealth system in this chapter too. I don't know if it's like, it's great for 2 hours. If it was to go 5, 6, 8 hours, that kind of longer journey with the same system, it wouldn't be that great. But I also I like the visuals of it, that it's almost like you're lifting up a green screen, and that's like what's making you invisible to everyone else. It's kind of cheesy in that way. But I thought, it's very silly, obviously, because like an enemy will be right in front of you, and they'll see you put this on, then they'll just like, what? They like can't, their brains cannot conceive of what they're understanding. Yeah.
It's very forgiving, which is great for this sort of thing.
But that's cool, because I definitely did not play it that way. But that would be a fun thing to, like, if I was replaying the game, I would definitely try that. Because that is a specific challenge run, and it's cool that you're rewarded for it. And I'm curious, if you kill everyone, if there's something different that happens too.
I want to try that too.
I just killed a few people. I tried not, like some people I'd skip if I could, but then other ones, as you mentioned, like are pretty hard to skip.
This chapter also has the coolest looking boss. This like frog demon thing with like an arm that's a snake. Like it's so cool and gross.
Yeah, and I think too, like just the design of this one, like as you mentioned, it is one dungeon, but I feel like that is just a super well designed level. I also like that your map is not very specific, so it's like it can give you maybe a bit of a hint, but not too much. But there's like hidden doors everywhere. There's a lot of verticality. Eventually you can go on the roofs, and that's like a completely different way. And I never felt like I knew exactly where the critical path was, and that was really fun to kind of try and learn it. In the one main building, I think there's like 6 different floors to it as well. And yeah, so I thought the level design there was just pretty outstanding. It was probably the individually best dungeon, I guess you could say, in this whole game for me. Just in terms of like the structure of it, at least. So that was pretty cool as well.
Maps in this game overall outstanding. The Edo Japan map is incredible. The Far Future map, I love it. I love the way that like schematic map looks.
Sure, yeah. I like that they're kind of contextualized right within each story.
Yeah.
And like the medieval one is just like like a scroll that you would unfurl, to get
Yeah,
that.
just
that person.
5 things on the map.
Yeah. Where are we going next, Patrick?
Ooh, let's do the far future.
All right. Tell us about the far future.
The far future is somehow a combination of 2001, Alien, and The Thing, I think, where like everyone is trying to you play as a little robot on a ship where you were built by one of like 5 people that are in this crew that are shipping some powerful monster back to Earth. And people start getting picked off one by one. Your captain is missing, and it ends up being this like slow burn murder mystery where, surprise, because it's a 2001 thing, it's the ship is doing it, the computer is doing it. But a very cool collection of characters in this one, including like the guy who invented this little cube robot, and like the military guy that's in there that like doesn't trust any of them and they don't trust him. And yeah, just very, I really like the dynamics between the characters in this one, and can be basically combatless until the final boss. It has like a little mini game that you can play, which is like a classic video game within the world of the game, that one of the crew members is obsessed with, and Cube can play it if he wants. I loved this chapter because it was so like just it was just a storytelling thing. Like, you make very few decisions. You just sort of like roll around as a cute little round robot and experience this horrible thing happening.
Yeah, with roller skates. I love that animation too. It's very slow framey as you're just kind of cruising around. Yeah, I like this one as well. I think for the whodunit part of it is exciting and well done. I think maybe the alien part of it, where he's chasing you around, is possibly less successful. I think maybe this one would fall a bit lower in my ranking, just because of like how much backtracking. Like, I just feel like you're just running back and forth between the same rooms over and over again, and a lot of it is very contrived. Of like, okay, now you gotta go to this room for whatever reason, and I don't know. I guess that's part of it where I felt like if they had shaved a half an hour off the story, it could have been that much more compelling to me, and it wouldn't have had any of the bloat in there. But overall, I do like the setting, and I like the cast. Like, it has a memorable cast of characters where they all have their quirk to it, and like the one guy who dies early on, and then his girlfriend's like, capturing his body and like placing it back in his bed and pretending he's alive. I love that. Like, she's delirious, which I thought was so fun. And I gotta say, I loved the combat of this chapter, maybe more like pound for pound than any other one, simply because your character doesn't level up, I believe, right? You don't get new abilities. And since it's these specific, like, I think it's like 8 battles that you're doing, they could tune the difficulty perfectly. So each one of these is like really well designed. Each one of them is a slightly different challenge that you're dealing with. And it's like, okay, how are you going to use your character's moveset creatively to combat this particular challenge? And so I think that that was maybe the thing that stood out to me the most. And that's not even really part of the main narrative in any way. It's completely optional, as you said. And I also like that you don't get the ability to save until you find the memory card somewhere.
You got to find the memory card.
Which is very fun. I guess we should also mention there's like a typing part of this game where you're typing in codes a couple of times. Which is like, every chapter has their gameplay gimmick, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And that's this one, which is kind of an odd addition, because there's one, to get the memory card, you have to solve a password, and it's very easy and obvious, at least for me. And one other detail I liked about this one is that on one of the people's shelves, you can find a retro Steel Titan, I guess, action figure.
Oh, cool.
I don't think there's actually like a art for it, but it's just like said in a line of dialogue. So I thought that was a fun connection, because I did not catch many connections between the stories until the end. So whenever one like that did pop up, I thought it was pretty cool. And then I think my last thing to shout out about this one is I think the use of music is pretty good, because there's not a lot of it. It lets you kind of be silent, lets it be a bit ominous. And there are certain moments when it's like, it kind of builds up the music where it's like, okay, here's 2 instruments playing the same sort of simple beat. And then it throws another instrument or 2 in there. It kind of,
just
it never
slowly
really
builds.
It doesn't really get, then it kind of goes back to nothing for a bit, but I still thought it was kind of an interesting use of music, what is supposed to be this kind of derelict spaceship almost. So Yeah, that's kind of all my points on it. I guess maybe the one thing is that your character maybe has less personality. He's kind of just a cute little robot, but I don't know.
He'll make coffee. He makes coffee.
Okay, that's a good point. I forgot about the coffee. That's pretty cute and very fun. But like for me, when I was making that decision at the end of the game, like which character am I going to start with? Like 0% of my brain said I got to play as Cube or Rhombus or whatever his name is.
Did either of you change any of the names of any of the characters?
I think
No.
I changed the robot's name. That's about it though. I wanted to remember the names of the characters in the canon way, so I was like, I should probably keep them as they are. And I mean, you're stuck with them for an hour, so it's like I don't know if I need to change this name too much. How about you, Patrick? Do you change them?
I only changed one name, and when we talk about him, I'll mention it.
Ooh, then. Okay.
Tease.
Mark, do you have any notes on that chapter?
I really liked it. The setting, like all of that, I was super into. This was another one where I was like, please just let me speed up the cutscenes. But I promise I won't say that for every chapter. Just know that that's probably my note for every chapter is like, please just let this go a little faster. But otherwise, I loved how they switched it up so much where it's like, and now it's like this closed room murder mystery where, like combat is completely optional for the most part. It's just about exploring the ship and experiencing the story. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Let's jump to present day next. I think this is the one I have the least to say about, but it is pretty cool. This is maybe the shortest chapter, at least for me. It was like this one tracked, I think, under an hour to beat it.
Yeah.
And essentially, you're just a guy who likes to fight, who wants to be the best fighter in the world. It's a very simple story. And it's kind of set up as almost like a Street Fighter sort of thing, where you can pick between the 6 opponents. And, actually, it's maybe more like Mega Man in a way, in that you can choose which one you want to go to. And, there's no like exploration or level to it, but you're essentially getting a power or different powers from each one that might be beneficial against other ones that you don't really know which ones are going to be beneficial for which until you've done them. But since you could like, essentially you're saving at that character select screen, you could kind of choose that way. So I thought that was pretty cool. And once again, I think the combat is maybe the best, like up there as the best here as well, just because they can maybe tune the balance a bit more. And I don't know, I just like the general concept of trying to bait out different moves from different people, whether that's, okay, they only will give me a move if it's like a counterattack. So I got to try and hit them with a certain move to get this counterattack out, or stand like 4 tiles to the right of them for them to use their move, or right next to them, stuff like that. Some of them are more obvious than others. But I really liked it, and I felt like, okay, if by near the end of this fight, and I'm almost taking them out and I don't have their 2 moves yet, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop fighting them.
Right.
I gotta find
Let them
out
hit you. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was the cool. 2 things I really loved about this chapter is the framing device, like you said, like this like Street Fighter fighting game type thing. And then the second part is how they switch it up, where in order to learn the move, you have to be hit by it. Like that's the only way. It's not defeating them. It is actually like being hit by the move in combat. I thought that was really neat. It's a good like palate cleanser chapter.
Yeah, totally. This was my 4th chapter, so the middle one for me. And yeah, you're right that like it works as a perfect palate cleanser.
Yeah. Mark, I think you're next. I think we only have 2 more before chapter 8 and such, but where do you want to go next?
Oh yeah, let's talk about Imperial China.
Sure.
So I thought this one was really neat because you play as an old Chinese man, which is not a character that you play as in video games very often.
Yeah, old people are very rare as playable characters.
Yeah, and basically you are like a kung fu master who knows that your life is coming to an end, and so you are on a quest to find an apprentice that you can pass it on to, and you find 3 people who can be potential successors, and you have like a couple of days, like 2 or 3 days, where you can have 4 battles, or I think it's like 4 or 5 or whatever. And as you battle them, they level up, and you are getting weaker, because you're getting older.
Wait, you're getting weaker? I did not notice that at all. Wow.
Yeah. And then at the I guess like spoilers, but like depending on which
these are all spoilers.
I guess that's true.
It's weird to like put a spoiler warning for this game because people can play it in so many different orders. That's like, well, I don't know.
But if you the apprentice that you like level up the most, they survive, and the other 2 die in a raid by this evil gang. And so Patrick, like you were talking about earlier, this is one of those where like you can experience the game differently depending on which of the three apprentices like you level up the most, and then you and the apprentice, you go and like defeat the bad guy, and then at the end you die, but the apprentice like has surpassed, they've like taken in everything that you taught them, and they have surpassed you as all like masters want their students to do, and they have become like the new Shifu, and it is very I found it really effective. I like this chapter a lot.
Yeah. Who was your pupil?
This is very reductive, but Hong, or I was going to say the fat guy. That's what I was going to say, really reductive. But there are a lot of fat jokes in, he's always hungry. That's like,
he's always hungry.
That's why I felt like no attachment to him, because every line was just, when's the next time I get to eat? So I'm glad you picked him, because I feel like he's probably the one that the least amount of people are going to pick. Once again, I want to see those live stats of who's picking what and what word and stuff. But I feel like, I don't know. What did you think of him? Now you got to spend more time with him. Is he a character that like why did you pick him? I guess I'm curious.
Actually, that's a good question. Maybe because I always, I guess all three of them are underdogs, but I was kind of interested to see how he would change as a character. And he doesn't really until like the very end.
Okay.
But who? It sounds like you did not pick Hong. So who did you pick, Dylan?
I picked. I can't remember his name, but not. I think Lei or Lee is the name of the girl. And the other guy who's almost like he's like the kid. So he's like the underdogs. And so at first I was really training up Lee, and I'm assuming that's her name, but I could be wrong. Sorry if I got that wrong. But then I was like, she's kind of an asshole. She's very cocky, and
she's mean.
I feel like this kid, it seems like he has a good heart. But I honestly felt like by the end of the time that I had done all those training sessions, I felt like I was actually probably pretty close to 50-50 between training them. And sorry, I didn't level Hong at all. So I wasn't sure if he was the canon character that moves on no matter what you train. Because I wasn't actually sure who I had trained more, because they had been very similar in quantity. But I guess he probably had one battle or two over the girl.
Wait. So, you didn't do Hong at all. I see. So you're saying the little kid guy. What about you, Patrick? Oh, who did you do?
I did Hong Haka as well.
Interesting.
I did it because Hong and the Shifu have a very nice interaction when you meet Hong, where Hong's like, my appetite is a curse, and like it left me this body that people make fun of me for. It's why I'm an outcast. And the Shifu's like, never curse. Your body's a gift. Like don't say that about yourself. And I was like, yeah, let's be with this guy.
So yeah, I think this chapter maybe one of my least favorite, honestly. I do like some of the story stuff about it, but once again, I think to me this is just like way too much combat for me, especially like that ending sequence where it's like you got to fight 10 pairs of people to get to the end. I'm like,
that one
thing,
that could have been half as many, and it would have been just as effective story-wise and as satisfying from a gameplay perspective. So I didn't need all of that combat.
Yeah, that one was cruel, because I agree. I feel like the combat in this, again, I basically just spammed the one move over and over. So when I did have to do combat, it was just kind of like, okay, but I liked the story, I guess, enough that it kind of boosted the whole thing for me.
Yeah, I think one of my problems with it is like all of these are very rushed stories. I think with the exception of the couple of them where the story is so simple that it works, but something like this guy becoming the best fighter in the world in 45 minutes is that's, pretty bold. But I felt that one here too, where okay, I got to find some people. I've got a few more days left of life, so I got to find some people, and so I'm just going to walk around for 5 minutes. Okay, I found 3 people who are willing to sacrifice their whole lives to come train with me. So I think it was a bit contrived for my liking, but it feels like a weird criticism because obviously these are short stories in a way, but I don't know. I guess in that way it was the one that I felt like it was the hardest to just believe in who these characters were. But I thought it was decent. Like I don't think there's a bad chapter here, honestly. I think they're all like at the very least decent, and this one was maybe at the bottom of the barrel, but it's still decent for me. Patrick, I don't know, you've shared some thoughts on this one. Any other thoughts on China?
No, I think we covered it.
Okay. I totally forget who's. We're kind of doing this thing where we're taking turns picking a chapter. I don't know where we're at, but let's. I guess prehistory is the last one of the 7 that we haven't talked about. So we'll talk about that. I guess this is the one character you changed the name of, Patrick. We haven't mentioned that yet. So
no, it is not the one that I changed the name of.
The next guy. That makes sense.
I left Pogo. The name's perfect.
You got to leave Pogo. Yeah, I think this one might be maybe my top 2. You know, it's one of my favorites here. I guess maybe a couple of the unique things about this one. There's actually a lot. I feel like there's like this smelling mechanic, which I don't know if there's much to dive into there. It's interesting. I actually really like the crafting in this one, where you're collecting different items like bones or sticks or rocks or fangs, things like this. And when you're defeating animals or just walking around the environment, and then you bring them to this one guy, and you essentially just pick 2 random ones that you want to put together, and somehow he combines them into a piece of gear. And I just find like trying to put these in different ways together and think about, okay, what would I get if I put a rock and a fur coat together? Like what would that make? I just thought that was kind of fun, and the visuals of it were entertaining. And then it was also kind of hard to remember. It was like, hey, what have I combined? Have I put a rock and a stick together? Have I tried that yet? So
I also couldn't tell. Is it prescriptive? Like there are specific recipes for specific things, or is it sort of random? I didn't look anything up on this one.
I think it is, because if you I think I found if you do a rock and bone, it always makes like a throwing knife. So that could be a good thing where it's like, hey, I want to stock up on throwing knives for the potential boss fight or something like that. So I think they are set. I found like when I would put the same 2 things together, it always seemed to do the same thing. But yeah, there's a lot to break down in this chapter. So what do you guys think about this one? I'm assuming you both like it.
I did like it. I actually kind of feel like it's the perfect one to like end on with like the 7th chapter.
Sure.
Because it does some things that are really funny that I think you would appreciate more that after you've played the other ones. Like, so you know, in the game you walk up to a shelf or something like that, and it says, you know, like shelf, and you press A to interact with it. But in this timeline, because there's no like spoken or written language, you walk up to it and it's just blank. Like you can still interact with it, but it doesn't say what it is because there's no like word for it. Or the characters, they don't speak in dialogue. They use like little like pictures or a lot of pointing to like get their to get the idea across. And like I think that's like clever in the beginning, but to see the contrast with the rest of the chapters, I think it like pays off really well.
I also love that all the moves that your characters get, they are like poorly described actions where it's like big huge leap, or you know, I mentioned bing bang bong earlier. That like they're all like funny little descriptions of like what he's gonna do. And you know, like he's got a move where he farts. Your monkey friend has a move where he throws poop.
Of course,
like it's so playful.
That just puts a poison field down on the ground.
It's so good. I did it all the time.
It's great. Yeah, especially on that boss fight, you got to toss that down.
Throw your poop around.
Yeah, I felt like this one, even though it didn't have words, was maybe like one of the most compelling stories of it. And I think it's like they really ham up the emotive nature of it. Like the angry face is like big red face with eyes that are you know, triangles and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I really like the story here. I like the journey that you're going on. And like the humor worked for me. Like there's a lot of just a physical comedy here, especially you, Pogo, and Gory, your ape companion. And you're always just like attacking each other and like getting mad at each other and kicking each other, throwing each other under the bus essentially. And like I just always thought it was funny. And then once again, they have a lot of great sound effects for all these things too that just make it feel like, I don't know, a kid's movie, a cartoon, that kind of thing. So yeah, it totally worked. And like the opposing cavemen have like Flintstone style cars that they're driving around, and there's always one guy that's left behind, so he's always like following. He always has to carry someone too. So yeah, I just love this one. I think it has so much heart, and it's a lot of fun. And yeah, I think the combat here works pretty well, and a lot of it is optional. You know, like how much hunting you want to do. Like you have to do 3 or whatever, but you could do a lot more if you want to. But then you can also just like have the perfect amount and then move on to the next point in the story. So I think it has like just good pacing and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Well, and it culminates in fighting a T-Rex, which like, hey, all video games culminate in fighting a T-Rex. I'll be happy.
Yeah. And I gotta commend the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
No. I was just gonna say that I completely agree with you that this is the one where I don't even think of the combat that much in a good way, where it's just like, oh yeah, it just felt sort of like organic, and there were random encounters, but a lot of it is within your control. And like with like the scent mechanic, and if you want to like level up by fighting some of the beasts when you're out in the field, like just the pacing of it felt very like modern, where it's like here's the kind of like story driven sections, then you go out into this outside like field that you can run around, and it's like Final Fantasy 12, and you can do as much as you want, and then you go back into like the funneled story sections. It just it all really worked together in a very like organic way.
Yeah. Oh, and I felt like the story was also nice too, in that it had like a turn in it, right? That like the first part of it is like there's the like caveman woman that escapes from like the enemy cavemen, and like there's the drama that happens around your home, and then the turn is you're exiled, and then you have to like go out on your own, and that's just it's cool to get like those two different beats of story in there.
Yeah, I feel like there's almost like multiple arcs that's going on or something. Yeah. You know, like it does feel like maybe one of the biggest journeys that happens, even though it's still, once again, like 2 hours, maybe 3 hours, something like that for this one. I got to commend the music. I think this is my favorite song in the game, is just like the adventure theme in this one, where it doesn't even really feel like, I guess it kind of has drums that feel maybe more tribal or prehistory or something, but it just has like, it starts out with this flute that's just playing this really nice melody, and then there's kind of like this Hammond organ sort of sound that's kind of mirroring what the flute plays like a couple seconds later, but with a little less flair. But like, man, that song on repeat all day. Like, it is so good. So definitely the song of the game for me was whatever the name of that song is. I don't know the name of it, but it's great.
It's also got this awesome repeated sequence where Pogo is either like unconscious or dreaming or something, and he's just in this endless field of wildflowers. And I've looked up what it looks like in the original version of the game, and the HD 2D like blows it out of the water. It's so cool, this like endless field of brightly colored flowers, just really peaceful and really beautiful.
And that kind of ties in how you find Pogo too, right? In chapter 9, right?
I started Pogo. I'm
I'm
not sure.
Well, we'll bring that up then. Okay, let's take our last ad break of the day, and then we can get into these final couple of chapters and close out here. We are back. So the Middle Ages is next. This is chapter 8. It unlocks after you've beat chapters 1 through 7. And this one is much more of a traditional JRPG in terms of setting. It's that medieval times, that there's magic spells and mystical swords and all that kind of good stuff. I really like the setup of this chapter, and I generally like it. I think to me, where it fell off is that there's just tons of backtracking in this one. I think the quantity of battles is like, this is mainly what I was talking about when I said that earlier, is just way too many battles. And, you know, you mentioned earlier, Mark, going up and down that staircase. You have to climb this mountain 3 times.
You got to go.
Oh my gosh!
So many
you can't
times.
Fast travel down. You got to go up and down over and over again. And it just drove me nuts, honestly, having to do that. And there's other sequences too that I feel like you have to do over and over again. And yeah, like the battles are unavoidable. So, and you know, once again, like since you're using this setting for, I guess we're kind of deeper in the spoiler territory now. Since you're using this for chapters 8 and 9, this setting. I think it kind of wore on me a bit, just going through these same spots over and over again and fighting the same battles. I guess in Chapter 9, the battles are a bit different.
Different, yeah.
But yeah, it sounds like you guys are much warmer on this chapter than I am. So take it away. What is it about this one that really stood out to you?
Well, first, I just want to say that this is the character whose name I changed. And when I do have to name a character in a video game, I always just name them my last name. So like I name the characters Ellers. That's always the name of my Pokemon trainer. It's, you know, what anytime I have to name a character, it's Ellers. And because it was like, oh, this is the 8th chapter, this is the last time we'll have the opportunity to do this, I'll name him Ellers. Spoiler for how this story ends, he's the bad guy.
Yeah.
I made myself the bad guy.
You either die the hero or live long enough to
that's right.
So for me, I think there were like 2 things that I really, really liked about this. One is the story. I think like the end of this chapter blew my mind in a way that I was not expecting, that I was like, okay, all the backtracking, all the crap in this chapter, like, is totally worth it. The second thing that I thought was great is there's this sweet spot of maybe about 25 minutes where you have 4 characters in your party and they all fight differently. And that is, in my opinion, the best combat in the game. It like you kind of like figure out how to use the characters together, what order, like you were talking about, Dylan, like they need to be in, which never mattered before. Like, I thought that was so fun. And then at the like kind of end, you have this run of boss battles to get to like the final battle that I just thought was like a really cool use of the combat system. And each one you have to fight a little bit differently and all of that. But everything you said about the backtracking, about kind of like the tediousness of those random encounters, especially when you're climbing up the mountain and there's like this bear that you have encounter it in the beginning, you're just like, I just have to run, and that just takes forever to like, but for me, like those moments of combat bliss in the center, and then the ending of the game, the whole run when you go back to that, like, I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but like you go back to that evil dungeon at the end, and you know, you have this successive run of boss battles until the final battle, and then the reveal after the final battle where you find out that, oh crap, I'm the bad guy. That was so awesome that, again, when the 9th chapter happens and you have the option of which of those 8 characters you want to play as, I was so tempted to play as that character because I just wanted to continue that story and see like what else is going to happen.
Nice. What else about this chapter, Patrick? Anything stand out to you?
I mean, I think Mark hit on a lot of what makes it so effective, but like, I love how kind of like slowly it deals out to you the revelation that you're the bad guy, because like you're tricked into killing the king, right? Like, that's not something that like you do of your own volition. It just sort of you're tricked through magic, and then like. You're still kind of like operating, you get thrown in jail. That feels very Chrono Triggery, right? I was like, ooh, are we going to get a trial? I would love a trial, but we don't.
Oh, the trial's great. Yeah.
The trial's the best part of that game. Then like, approaching the evil lair, the roost, and discovering what like your old friend was up to. And it's like, oh yeah, he found peace and love with this woman that you thought you were rescuing from him, is so like devastating that when like the hate or like it feels like he is a victim of like the circumstance of like he's not a bad guy necessarily. He's just like maybe a little myopic and like operates in his own interest.
It's such a cool villain. It's such a cool villain origin story.
I agree. Yeah, I think maybe the part for me that I wish it worked for me as well as it did for you guys is, I don't know if there's a name for this phenomenon, but just when a character gets caught doing a bad thing and then they just refuse to explain or even try to explain anything. Like that whole scene, I was so bothered when you kill the king and then all these people come in and they're all grilling you and saying stuff and your character just blank stare, doesn't say anything. It's like, well, obviously you're going to be suspect if you just act like you fucking did it.
What are you going to say though? Are you going to say it looked like a monster?
I don't know. Like I would like him to try.
Why?
I want him to try to say there was a monster. Like say something. Say he was the Lord of Death. Say whatever you want. Like I don't know. It bothered me a little bit. And then I got kicked out of the town and all that stuff. But I guess from that we can kind of roll into Chapter 9 then, which is once again the same setting. You get to pick which of the characters you want to play as, and like I said, it's kind of like an Octopath Traveler in a way, where you're going around the map again. Everyone's somewhere, and you can recruit all of them. I think one thing that maybe bothered me a bit about this is that you can't just have them all on your roster just in the reserve and switch out your active party of 4. You have to pick and choose which ones you want, which I don't know. I wish you could have 8 and then you could just choose which 4 you want to deploy in battle. Yeah. And it felt so bad to like, I'm sorry, Cube, I'm kicking you out of my party because like you're not as good of a fighter.
And he does a little sad.
He does the sad face. Oh, breaks my heart. But yeah, I think I think when you find Pogo, he's like, you go, I guess, south from the town. Sorry, I don't know if I'm spoiling this for you, Mark, because you're in this chapter. But I think he's like in a field of flowers. I believe is where he's
Oh, okay.
at
Well,
when you find him.
he wakes up in the field of whatever it is, like the balm weeds or whatever.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah,
That makes
that's
sense.
where he
Okay.
woke up.
I had picked Akira for this because who's from Near Future. As I mentioned, that was my favorite chapter. So I just went with my favorite character from my favorite chapter. It felt like a pretty easy decision. I mean, even then, it wasn't an easy decision. Right? Yeah, I just finished playing Prehistory, or I guess before Chapter 8, and really liked Pogo. And yeah, I also understand where you guys come from. It's like, well, I feel like I should continue the story. I guess Orsted is his canon name.
Yeah, I don't know how you say his name. Yeah,
His
I
name
almost
is
want to
Ellers.
rename him just because it's like a weird name to say. But yeah, I like the setup of this chapter, and I think for me, once again, just too much of that combat, which I needed to do because I needed to grind more. But I don't. It's particularly when I was in that dungeon with Akira, and I can't go more than 10 steps without encountering another battle, and I was losing my mind going through these same battles over and over again. So yeah, I like the idea here, and I wish the gameplay had landed for me a little bit more, because I guess it ultimately does sour my opinion on the game a little bit, that the ending doesn't necessarily work for me as much. But I really liked the idea here of everyone getting ripped into this one timeline. Mark, we don't know who you picked. I don't think. Who did you pick for this chapter?
I ended up picking the character from Edo, Japan. I can't remember their name off the top of my head.
Aboromaru, I think.
Aboromaru,
yeah. Yeah. So that's the one that I started with.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
I really liked the end of this game, the ninth chapter. It's the first time that I was like, okay, I'm gonna look up a guide just to like see what's here, right? Like what all is there for you to do? Because like, yeah, you can. It seems like when you start, you can march right up to the final boss and take him on immediately, right?
Right.
But it's all really like, how do you want to prepare your party to take this on? And one of the things that you can do, as you said, is recruit all 7 of the characters, or 6, because obviously you start as one. But then everyone has their own like unique dungeon that you can go through to get their most powerful weapon. And in some of those dungeons are like optional bosses that you can go up against. So for me, I recruited everyone, and I started doing the like secret dungeons for each one that I was like interested in taking into like the final battle. And then one more, I also did cubes dungeon, which is like a logic puzzle dungeon. It's all puzzles. It's fun. And in doing those 5 hidden dungeons, I had leveled up to the point where I could take on the final boss without much difficulty.
Nice.
I mean, I say without much difficulty. He straight up killed 2 of my characters, and I was down to just Pogo and the Edo Japan.
Nice.
Yeah, just those 2 guys. But yeah, I loved this. I thought it was so much fun to like find those characters again and then put them through something that like called back to their original chapter. Like the ninja guy, you have to take him through the trial of keys, which is a very maze-like structure, not at all dissimilar to the fortress that you're taking on in his chapter. In the Sundown Kids chapter, or his final dungeon, you're in a space, you're just looking for his gun, like that's all of it. And you're going into this cave that gets darker and darker every time a bell tolls, and after 8 bells, then you are attacked by this nearly impossible monster that you have to try to fight and then like get out of there. So that's just like a couple of examples. So there's like a mini version of each chapter waiting for you within chapter 9, and then like super difficult bosses on top of that if you want to take them on sort of optionally.
Man, that's cool. I definitely skipped some of these dungeons, so I should go back and fill those out, because one, it'll make that final boss fight easier so I can get a good ending myself. But also, like, that just sounds fun. Pulling back some of those mechanics from the earlier games. That's really cool.
Yeah, but I mean, you have to be, I think, willing to engage with the mechanics of the game and the mechanics of the combat in a
Right.
way that the rest of the game does not force you to engage with them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Any final thoughts on Chapter 9? I think I just have a couple in closing notes here, but anything on Chapter 9 specifically?
Well, after you get through your notes, I want to talk about the bad ending that you got and the good ending.
Sure. Well, also, I have a quick question. So, do you guys think that the Orsted character? I don't know why that name's so hard for me. I felt like Isaac from Golden Sun just
Yes.
seems
Yes.
like he's based off this or inspired by this character, which
Mhm.
timeline wise tracks. I guess Golden Sun came out a few years after this game. I mean, maybe he's just a anime dude with blonde hair and a sword, but to me, I felt like there was something there. Do you guys agree with me? Is there something there?
There's something to the posture for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Another random, because like I said, I was trying to look out for more, like I guess things that connect the different chapters. And one thing I noticed is that in near future, one of the kids in the orphanage's name is Watanabe,
Mhm.
and then I forget what they are, but in Middle Ages and Far Future, there's also that name. I don't think it's a reference to that character, but it's just that name that seems to be recurring. So I don't know if it's just maybe a very common Japanese name that is like a John, and it would just pop up a bunch of times. Because I think like there's different character designs, like designers for all the characters,
Yeah.
but I think the story was kind of mainly written by one guy. So you would think that there wouldn't be just different writers writing these sections that would then have the same name appearing. So do you guys think there's
Yeah.
anything to that, or am I just going crazy over here?
I mean, there might be, because isn't the robot that you fight in the lab halfway through the near future, isn't that inhabited by
Yes,
Watanabe's
that's
father?
where the
Yeah.
Watanabe name comes up. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then I forget what the last one was, but I definitely remember seeing that name a third time in a different time era. So I don't know what's going on there. And then another thing too, and this one's obviously more on the nose and more obvious, and it actually comes up. But in Chapter 8, when you go through that dungeon, and then you kind of have a statue of each of those final bosses. Obviously, that ends up being a mechanic too. But I thought it was. I mean, because it also, once you get introduced to it, you don't actually engage with that for another maybe half an hour or something. So I thought it was just a fun shout out to kind of have this connection between all the characters. But yeah, that was it. So in terms of the ending, I mean, essentially the ending is just like canonizing you losing to the boss, and it's just like a dark, grim world where you don't win, So I don't know. It doesn't really feel like an ending so much. It's more just like, I don't know, in like Nier Automata, how there's just like endings all over the place. It feels like one of those kinds of things where it's just like, we just wrote an ending here that takes you to credits, but like this is not the end of the game.
You should try again. Yeah.
So,
It's like a choose your own adventure book when you fall off the cliff, and it's just like you died.
I fell off the cliff and died, pretty much, is my canon ending technically. So, and then like I said, YouTube I guess there's at least a couple good endings. I don't know how many endings there is, but I watched one of the potential good endings. So yeah, Patrick, I don't know how much you want to talk about. Obviously, Mark said he's okay with some spoilery stuff, and maybe he'd get a different ending anyway. But yeah, the ending really worked for you, kind of connecting everything in a nice way.
Yeah, so like you're doing battle against Dio, which is the sort of like evil spirit that is part the Chapter 8 protagonist, or like the demon that possesses him, or it's unclear to me. I think it's the personification of his hatred that gets spread throughout the timeline.
Okay.
And you defeat that boss, and then it's just Orsted like standing there, being like, you should finish me, you should kill me. And I mean, first of all, I'm playing this as Pogo, so my options are whore or burr.
Oh, I love that.
It's like, okay, what is it? Which one is yes and which one is no? But I opted to not kill him, because it's clear that it's like a cycle of violence thing, right? So I was like, we're gonna walk away. And as you leave, you pass by the statues, the 7 statues of the different forms of Odio from throughout the timeline, and it makes each one of your characters square off against the final bosses from their chapters again. But they have the stats that they have now, and the moves that they have now. So, like Pogo goes up against that Tyrannosaurus Rex all by himself, but he's got this bing bang boom move that I was talking about that he can deal 800 damage in one turn. And it's just it's this incredible victory lap where you just like smash all these forms of the hatred from throughout the timeline. And then like Dio forms one more time, and all 7 characters like line up, and everyone gets to take a swing at him, and free Orsted from like the grasp of this timeless evil. It just felt so great. And Orsted is like, what did I do to deserve you freeing me? And because I was playing as Pogo walks up to him and gives him a hug.
Oh.
And it was just like the game ends on such a sweet note, and everyone goes back to their timeline and like is happy. And it just rules. It made me so happy to experience the end of this game like that.
I love that, because I watched that ending, but like obviously experiencing it and having like more build up to get there is going to make it land that much more. So
yeah,
that's great. I really like that. You sold me. I'm going to go back.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
I may not do it today. I might give myself some time to like
give yourself a break.
Okay, I'm ready for some more combat. Let me jump. Yeah, cool. Any final thoughts on this game, guys? I feel like we've been pretty thorough, but anything that we haven't discussed yet today?
I'm just really glad that it got localized, or that this like remake came outside of Japan. I really enjoyed Live Alive.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, even though it's a game that came out in, I think, 94, right? It still is unique, and maybe they've changed a couple things, but like it still is a very cool game that nothing has, at least that I've played, has quite managed to match in terms of the vibe and stuff like that. So very cool game. And yeah, thanks guys for joining me. This, I said before we started, it'd probably be about an hour and a half. We're at 2:10 right now, so that's usually how it goes here. I'm always like way off of my estimates of time. But this was a lot of fun. It was so meet you guys, but also have this kind of in-depth conversations. It was a lot of fun. So, why don't you guys shout out your podcast again in terms of where people can find it, and then also where people can find you personally on the socials and all that stuff.
Go ahead, Mark.
Go first.
Oh yeah, I mean, check us out on Nintendo Cartridge Society. It's a twice weekly podcast. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. It's all about Nintendo. We do a news episode on Tuesday where we recap the news from the week, and then on Thursday it's a topic episode where like we were talking about earlier, we're doing rankings or talking about like a specific theme, something like that. So definitely check us out. I'm not really active on social media, so I'll give a shout out to the Nintendo Cartridge Society Twitter. You can check us out at NinCart Society.
Awesome. Patrick?
And then you can also find me on Twitter at Patrick_Ellers. And it's Ellers like the name of the main character from Chapter 8 of Live Alive.
Oh, yes, of course. Of course.
The famous character, of course. Okay, guys, this was a lot of fun. We will be back next week for more Sidequest action. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for listening, everyone. We will see